news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, November 29th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 7 degrees. It's minus 8 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. A couple of Omicron COVID-19 variant cases confirmed in the city of Ottawa. That is also believed to be the first cases in our country. Here's City News reporter Prushka Gobolkista.
Ottawa Public Health says that 2 individuals who tested positive for the Omicron variant are in self-isolation after returning from Nigeria. And although many countries, including Canada, have imposed travel restrictions to many Southern Africa countries, infection disease specialist Dr. Isaac Bogosh says that might not be an effective solution.
And the reason is this is a transmissible viral infection. It's likely well outside of the area that it's discovered. And in fact, we've seen that over the last 36 hours. Cases have popped up in lots of countries and lots of other regions that are distant from the area that the travel restrictions are focused on.
Public Health says that those who have traveled to the Southern Africa region are being asked to self-isolate or get tested as soon as possible. They also add that they're working closely with the province to monitor any other variants of concern. And later today, we are expecting to get an update from city health officials on what the next steps will be. Pirushka Gopal-Kista, City News.
Now, City News will have extensive coverage of the COVID cases and the new variant this morning on the Rob Snow Show, including the Canadian Research Chair on Immunology, Dawn Bodish. She will join Rob shortly. Also plan to carry the Chief Medical Officer of Health and the province's health minister's update. That is scheduled for a half an hour from now at 9:30. Dr. Paul Remiliotis from the Eastern Ontario Health Unit will update the local response to the variant, and that's coming up in the 11 o'clock hour. The Rob Snow Show runs from 9 until noon on City News. City News time 9:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
It's a cool start to our Monday. The high today just -1. Sun and cloud do have a chance of a few flurries, though. Tonight, mainly clear, -8. And tomorrow, some flurries in the afternoon. Light snow with a strong wind for Tuesday evening. High tomorrow, +1. For today, the high, -1.
And right now in Ottawa, -7 degrees. It's -8 in Smiths Falls. If you have a Via trip planned for either today or tomorrow, you will be contacted by that company. They have an operational issue that has forced the cancellation of numerous trips. Via says on Twitter the cancellations include some Ottawa trains due to an operational issue impacting the infrastructure owner. Trains scheduled from Ottawa and to the city are affected. If you're meeting someone coming from Toronto, there are several trains affected there as well. Now, Via says the issue is beyond its control. Any impacted customer, though, will be contacted. Crews worked through the night building a portable dike along Highway 1 in British Columbia's Fraser Valley in hopes of protecting a key link between Abbotsford and Chilliwack. Yet another wicked rainstorm pounded part of southern BC with more than 100 millimeters of rain over the weekend. The mayor of Abbotsford says river levels are rising and the flood threat facing his city is soaring once again.
I wish the rain would stop, but we don't have control over that.
But the rain did stop overnight, and although the Nooksack River in Washington state has topped its banks, those waters haven't yet inundated low-lying Abbotsford areas. A mudslide forced precautionary evacuations and alerts of one Abbotsford neighborhood, and Highway 1 east of Abbotsford is closed until further notice while that portable dike is built. Flood warnings cover rivers from Merritt south to Hope, and flood watches affect large parts of Vancouver Island and the inner south coast. But otherwise, the focus is on the next storm, and up to another 100 millimeters of rain due over coastal and southern BC starting tonight. Beth Layton, The Canadian Press.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Good, bad, or complicated.
There's no news in Ottawa and the Valley he won't talk about.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
All right, let's launch right into it. Omicron in Ottawa. That's our top story. We're all over it here this morning at City News. Coming right up, Dr. Dawn Bodish, one of our go-to experts going back to the earliest days of the pandemic. She is the executive director of the Firestone Institute of Respiratory Health, Canada Research Chair in Aging and Immunity. Firestone Institute is part of St. Joe's Healthcare in Hamilton. Dr. Bodish is a professor of medicine at McMaster University, has a PhD in microbiology and immunology at the University of British Columbia, a Bachelor of Science degree with honors in microbiology from the University of Guelph, and was a Canadian Institute of Health Research postdoctoral fellow at the University of Oxford. Lots of letters after her name. And she can really speak to what threat, if any, is posed by this new variant that most of the world just learned about a few days ago and has consumed the news cycle ever since, Omicron. Then coming up at 9:30 this morning, and we've cleared the decks so we can bring this to you live here on City News. 2 cases in Ontario, both of them here in Ottawa, both of them travel related. Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health set to speak to this at 9:30 this morning, Dr. Kieran Moore. That's happening in Toronto at the Queen's Park Media Studio. We have a feed direct from there, a reporter in the room. And again, that's scheduled to start at 9:30. And you'll want to keep checking in with us here at City News throughout the day because there's a meeting of the Ottawa Board of Health. That's at 5 o'clock this evening. The big topic of that meeting was supposed to be voting about the budget for the Board of Health, for Ottawa Public Health, the draft budget, but we now anticipate there will be some kind of briefing given the news about this variant. Omicron in Ottawa. And City News will be covering that for you later today as well. Also on our program this morning, Dr. Paul Remiliotis is the Chief Medical Officer of Health for the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. He is slated to join us at, I believe, 11:30 this morning. Eastern Ontario Health Unit is places like Cornwall, Hawkesbury, United Counties, northern portion of Akwesasne. And like the rest of Ontario, I was just looking at their case counts. Case counts have been tracking higher in that area lately. And Dr. Paul, as he is affectionately known throughout the region, has been a frequent contributor to this program throughout the pandemic, and he'll join us at 11:30. Jeffrey Johnston is an international affairs columnist with the Kingston Whig Standard. He's with us every Monday morning, and you know one of his major themes in many columns over the course of this year has been vaccine equity, rich countries and poor countries. And that's an issue that is front and center this morning. That we were warned that something like this not could happen, but would happen. That this new variant, it's entirely predictable that this is happening because of vaccine inequity. That the rich countries have hoarded the vaccines. And maybe Canada, we're one of the worst hoarders of them all. And in the meantime, poor countries have been left to fend for themselves. In Canada, as of this morning, according to Our World in data, it's about 76% of the total population is now fully vaccinated. Whereas in Nigeria, where these new Omicron cases in Ottawa are believed to have originated, the percentage of that country's population that is fully vaccinated is 2.9%. 2.9%. In Botswana, it's 20%. In South Africa, it's less than 25% of South Africa's population is fully vaccinated. And there are those who are saying, we warned you. We told you so. This virus, this pandemic, is not going anywhere as long as so much of the developing world is struggling to vaccinate its people, and the industrialized world, the rich countries, have to do a better job of helping poor countries get that job done. And my friend Jeffrey has written many columns about that. Vaccine equity. So it's good timing that he's joining us this morning. We are also following everything that's been happening on financial markets. When news of this new variant, Omicron, first hit the news media early Friday morning, it sparked a global sell-off in the stock market and some of the commodities like oil. It was the worst day of the year for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, Friday. And it was like the financial markets that we saw during the depths of recent waves. You had the so-called stay-at-home stocks all moving higher. Like, oh, here we go again. Everybody's going to be staying at home. So people were buying companies like Zoom and Peloton and Shopify and Amazon. And all the so-called reopening stocks, shares in things like big restaurant companies or airlines, cruise lines, anything to do with travel, oil stocks, because the oil price was way down. They were all moving lower. But it seems, looking here, markets are not so scared this morning, expected to open higher at 9:30 and enjoy the cheap gas. It may be a one-day wonder. The oil price is rebounding, up about 6% this morning. It was down, 13% at one point on Friday. And a lot of the stocks that got hammered on Friday are rebounding today. And among the two most notable gainers are the vaccine makers, Pfizer and Moderna. Both CEOs appeared on CNBC this morning, and both said it's going to take a few more weeks before there's any kind of clarity on what Omicron's impact is going to be, although the CEO of Moderna said it appears to be, quote unquote, highly infectious. Highly infectious. The World Health Organization this morning called it high risk. Both CEOs also sounded confident that they could have some kind of modified vaccine ready to go sometime in the new year, maybe early 2022. The CEO of Moderna told CNBC it could take, quote unquote, several months to develop a vaccine specifically for this variant. We'll also get the latest case counts coming out. Well, they usually come out in about an hour from now. And the fact is, the number of COVID-19 cases was already on the rise before this news broke about this new variant. Province-wide, almost 1,000 cases reported yesterday. 964 cases for Ontario was the number yesterday. Compare that to a month ago. A month ago, the Ontario-wide number was 356. Yesterday, 964. That's an increase in cases of 170% in a month. But how relevant are case numbers now? And is it more important to look at the situation in the hospitals? As of the weekend, Ottawa Public Health was reporting 10 people in Ottawa hospitals. 10. And none in ICU. Not a single patient in ICU. Knock on wood. That it stays that way. And that the situation here locally remains well in hand. I guess the question, the big unknown is, for how long could Omicron be some kind of game changer? It's early days, but we're going to keep on top of it. You are welcome to join the discussion this morning. During our Talk Back Hour, we do that every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock. 750-1310 is our call-in line. I just want your reaction to this news. Omicron in Ottawa. It's been all over the news. What is it? Overblown media hype or a worrying turn of events? Travel bans already in place for some countries. Are we going back to the days of lockdowns and school closings and capacity limits and curfews, the Atlantic bubble? Or will all of this be a non-story a month from now? It's the biggest story in the world today, and this is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
It started out with a small outdoor booth in what was called Artist Alley, which is actually the area just outside our store on William Street, where for a couple of years we sold our jewelry directly on the street. And then we slowly evolved to having an indoor location in this building, 55 Borrowed Market Square. We then moved to another location in Place de Ville, and then moved back down here on Dalhousie Street at Irrigere in the 90s, and then back into this building again in 2000 as a collection. I do a collection of jewelry called Cirque that's mainly beaded work with a combination of semi-precious and vintage beads. And then she does a hat collection called Fanfreluche that's all cut and sewn hats in a variety of fabrics and for all of the seasons of the year. We've curated and sourced the artisans that we represent in a lot of different ways over the years since it's been, since 1985. Some people come to us since we're known, and other artisans that we represent might recommend that they come and see us. Some people we find at craft shows, or we see their work, somebody wears it in, and we go and track it down and bring it. And then some people, interestingly, are with us in one medium, and then sometimes they evolve to another. They're all Canadian and mainly local. With the roughly 50 people that we have, I'd say more than half of those are Ottawa-Gatineau, and then the rest are from other cities in Canada, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, etc. If you can afford it, go to a small business and spend some money. It's lovely when you come in and, give me a pep talk and tell me how much you love this place and you've been coming here for years. But if you can afford it, please spend some money too, because all the pep talks in the world are not going to pay my rent, which is still full rent even when we're closed. Then secondly, if you can't afford to spend money, follow the businesses that you want to support on social media. Go to their Instagram, go to their Facebook, follow their Twitter, and then retweet, share their Facebook page, like and comment, because if you can't afford to, as many of us can't right now, to do extra expenditures, doing all of those little things like that will raise the visibility of those small businesses, and hopefully for them result in some online or curbside or other business for them.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
The World Health Organization had a briefing for member states this morning, 194 member states of the World Health Organization technical briefing, and said that the Omicron variant is likely to spread further and that it poses, quote, a very high global risk. There are 2 cases in Ottawa, the first in Canada. So let's get some expertise. Joining us now is Dr. Dawn Bodish, Executive Director of the Firestone Institute of Respiratory Health, Canada Research Chair in Aging and Immunity, and welcome back to City News.
Thank you so much for having me.
How surprised are you that this news is breaking about a new variant?
To be honest, this was the most predictable thing that has happened during this pandemic. We all said very clearly, very loudly, if we don't get vaccines to everywhere in the world, places where there's lots of infections and, frankly, lots of people who might be partially vaccinated or be immunocompromised, this gives the virus a chance to live in those people, to live in those communities, to develop mutations that may help with spread or may help evade partial immunity. So even where the mutations occurred in the virus were what we predicted would happen if we didn't get vaccines out to the rest of the world. So unfortunately, I think for me, I really felt like this was the shoe dropping. We've been waiting, we've been worrying about parts of the world that hadn't been getting these vaccines quickly. And as a result, we got this variant, which now puts us at danger. So our take-home message for infectious disease is nobody's safe until everybody's safe.
The number of mutations numbering upwards of 50, what does that tell you, if anything?
Our best prediction, and of course, you never get to know. You never get to go back in time and find out who or where this virus originated. But our best guess is it probably spent a long time in somebody who was either partially vaccinated, or perhaps was somebody who couldn't mount a good vaccine response, or perhaps even somebody who'd already been infected with an earlier version of the virus. So in all those cases, if you've been affected with the original or with Alpha or something like that, or if you'd only had one dose of your vaccine, or if you were immunocompromised or older, you have some immunity. And so when a virus gets into that person, if it can just hang in there enough to survive and eventually develop a mutation that will allow it to then sneak under that immune response and then eventually develop a mutation that will allow it to be transmitted, this is exactly what we would predict would happen, and that's exactly what did happen. So our best guess is it spent a long time in somebody who had imperfect immunity.
Some experts are saying it is likely going to take a few weeks to know how dangerous this is. What will scientists be looking for over the next few weeks?
We'll be looking for two major things. The first case is, can it evade immunity? Do fully vaccinated people get sick? And the answer so far is looking fairly promising. Most of the cases that have been identified in travelers have not been associated with hospitalization, severe illness in fully vaccinated people. So we are cautiously optimistic that being vaccinated may provide some protection. Delta was a terrible variant because it actually caused people to be more infectious. So instead of one person infecting 2 to 3, it could be 6 to 9. And it sent more people to the hospital and was more problematic that way. So we'll also be looking to see if this variant makes people more or less sick than it did with the Delta variant. And then again, because it did seem to be a virus that evolved under some selection pressure from people who maybe didn't have perfect immunity, could it sneak under immunocompromised people, older people who are a little bit far out from their booster shot, people who've only had one shot, people who'd been previously infected with an earlier variant? So those are the major things we're looking for. It certainly does look from preliminary data that has the capacity to spread fast. So one person will infect more people than previous versions.
Okay, so it's immune escape potential is the language that the World Health Organization used this morning. Immune escape potential. And does it have a transmissibility advantage?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So you can imagine with our original strain of the virus, one person hypothetically infected 2 to 3. And so then those 2 to 3 people could go on and infect 2 to 3 people. And then when we got Delta, it was 6 to 9. So really spread really quickly, and less exposure time could lead to an infection. So for the transmissibility, we'll be looking to see how much virus do people carry who have this, and what is that magic number? Is it closer to 2 to 3? Is it higher to 6 to 9? And then hopefully, using testing and tracing to keep people found and isolated so that we don't have it enter into the community.
How challenging is it to, and I'm using air quotes here, tweak a vaccine?
The nice thing about the mRNA vaccines is they do seem to be fairly easy to tweak compared to most vaccines. So we've got we've got 3 avenues. First of all, we know that once people are boosted with their third dose, they do tend to transmit much less than after their second dose. So boosting people will be helpful. The second strategy is creating a variant-specific booster that targets these mutations, and that may also be helpful. And then the third option is one that we're pursuing at McMaster and many places around the world, is making what we call the next generation vaccines that will target different arms of the immune response and maybe won't rely as much on antibodies, rely more on white blood cells called T cells to do some of the killing for us. So those are the 3 strategies. The easiest strategy is getting everyone boosted. The second easiest is making a new mRNA vaccine.
Can I just interrupt you right there?
Yeah.
Getting everyone boosted? Do you think it's inevitable that everyone will need 3 shots then?
I absolutely do. I mean, when you think of most of our adult vaccines, hepatitis, HPV, all our childhood vaccines, they always come in 3s. And 3 seems to be the magic number for really getting permanent good memory. These mRNA vaccines far exceeded expectations for how well they work, especially in older people, but they do seem to wane pretty quickly. So we definitely want the over 60s to be next in line to get their booster, and I strongly suspect by this time next year, everyone will have their 3rd shot.
Okay. Because right now it's in the general population, it's going by age 70 years of age and older right now.
Correct.
And you expect that with the third shot, we'll kind of just go through the whole process again then?
I think so. And, I think it is important to do that, but not to do it too quickly, because we don't want to give everyone who's, just been vaccinated a month ago their third dose, because that third dose would be much better spent in South Africa to stop the emergence of these. So we need to get boosting when we need it. Okay. But until we need it, we should not be wasting vaccines that aren't required right now. We should be sharing those with the rest of the world.
Do you see eventually a role for therapeutics? The CEO of Pfizer this morning said his company is developing an antiviral for COVID-19.
The problem with antivirals in general is you often don't get a lot of time with them. So, for example, we had a really good antiviral for flu, and we got precisely one flu season out of it before the virus mutated and it wasn't effective. So antivirals are going to be important. They're going to be helpful, but they are sort of time limited. Okay. And so, vaccination is our best shot by far. And the other thing I always tell people who are a little bit hesitant about vaccines is, by the time you are eligible for your antiviral or some of these new antibody therapies that are available, the virus has already got in there and done some damage. Whereas if you're vaccinated, you can stop or minimize that from happening. So it's an important strategy for sure, but vaccination is the best strategy.
What is the best way right now for people to protect themselves?
The best way right now, so Public Health Agency of Canada has some really good guidelines for what to do when you're spending time with vaccinated people and unvaccinated people. Obviously, vaccination is important. Everyone should get that. If you're over 70, get that third booster before you spend time with your unvaccinated or under-vaccinated grandchildren. That is essential. We know that kids and the 20-somethings have the highest rates of infections right now. So the holiday seasons are a bit of a time bomb. If you've got grandma and grandpa who have waning immunity and they're hugging their grandkids who either are too young to be vaccinated or only have one dose. That's key. The second thing is make good decisions about your socialization. If you're with people who are under-vaccinated, so your kids who only have one shot, or people who are unvaccinated, and you've got an immunosuppressive condition, if you're older, if you're not vaccinated yourself, those masks, distancing, open windows, these things are all really, really essential. So I encourage people to go to the Public Health Agency of Canada. They've got a nice infographic on what to do if you're vaccinated and you want to spend time with other vaccinated people or unvaccinated people, or a mix of both, and what's safe and what's not.
Always so great to have you on our show. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. Take care.
Thank you. Dr. Dawn Bowdish, Executive Director, Firestone Institute of Respiratory Health, Canada Research Chair in Aging and Immunity. Coming up right after the 9:30 news, we do expect to join a live news event with Ontario's Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore, live here on City News.
Now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, November 29th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, minus 6 degrees. Here's what's making news this hour. The most predictable thing in this pandemic has happened. Don Bodish from McMaster University tells the Rob Snow Show areas of the world that are not well vaccinated are going to spawn variants of COVID-19. That has happened again, this time the Omicron variant, she says. They're all watching to see if this variant is more easily spread and just how dangerous it may be. The province's chief medical officer of health expected to address this variant as 2 cases so far in the country, both in Ottawa, have already happened. 2 people returning from Nigeria testing positive for that variant of COVID-19. Federal government is set to introduce a tough bill that would make practices designed to change somebody's sexual orientation or gender identity illegal. The Liberals' last attempt to ban conversion therapy fell short of becoming law before the election. While it banned conversion therapy for children and those adults who did not consent, this version, expected to be introduced in Parliament today, will bar the practice outright. Another major concert announced for the Canadian Tire Centre. This time it's Chris Stapleton will be on stage Friday, April 29th. But tickets go on sale this Friday at 10 o'clock at Ticketmaster and the Canadian Tire Centre box office. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So again, any moment now, we expect a briefing to begin from Dr. Kieran Moore, Ontario's Medical Officer of Health. And of course, when it begins, we'll have it for you in its entirety. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News. Still ahead, coming up between 10 and 11 o'clock. Talkback Hour. This will be the topic of our Talkback Hour. Omicron, your reaction. Some people are already calling it. I've talked to people in my own circles, but nothing but media hype, overblown media hype. And as Dr. Bodish said, entirely predictable. This is not the first variant, and it won't be the last. So there's that opinion, but there is the worrying development about it. Does it have the ability to evade vaccine immunity? So we'll talk about that. Vaccine equity will be the topic of our conversation when international affairs columnist Jeffrey Johnston joins us from the Kingston Whig Standard, and Dr. Paul Remiliotis is the medical officer of health for the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. He'll give us this trickle-down information. You know, this news breaks out of, say, the World Health Organization, for example. How does that impact and manifest the operations of a local public health unit responsible for a community like Cornwall and Hawkesbury? So that's all coming up on the Rob Snow Show. It is certainly the biggest news story in the world right now. Omicron, this latest variant in Ottawa, 2 cases identified, both related to travel to Nigeria. And really, that's about all we know about these cases. The individuals are reported to be in isolation. Nothing is known about their condition, whether they are even symptomatic, let alone whether or not they are in the hospital. The latest on the hospital situation here locally with COVID-19 is actually very encouraging. There are 10 people in the hospital, in Ottawa area hospitals because of COVID-19, but nobody is in ICU, nobody is on a ventilator. The numbers province-wide are slightly higher, 122 or so province-wide, and 85 of those cases requiring a ventilator. That was as of this weekend. We'll get new case counts and hospitalization data coming up in less than an hour here. And as soon as we get those, we'll bring them to you here on City News. But let me give you a sample of some of the headlines that are out there this morning involving this Omicron variant. News broke of this on early Friday morning. It dominated the weekend news cycle And no exception this morning. It is still the biggest news story. More countries reporting cases of the Omicron variant. It's well north of a dozen now. Omicron variant symptoms, mild so far. There is a report that it's mild so far. The symptoms. Travel restrictions prompted worldwide. G7 to hold emergency COVID meeting. Japan closes its borders. UK eyes expanding vaccine boosters as third Omicron case found. World put on high alert over Omicron. Race against time. Omicron variant puts the world in a race against time. World rushes to learn more. Fauci says Omicron likely more contagious. Please get vaccinated. And on and on and on it goes like that. It's just literally by the hour now. It is one news story after another ever since this news broke on Friday morning. And it was like that all weekend long. And now here we are, 9:37 on a Monday morning. Omicron is not only world news, it's local news with 2 cases here in Ottawa, the first Canadian reported cases. We just had Dr. Dawn Bodish on our program, one of the top scientists in the country when it comes to immunology. Dr. Dawn Bodish and her advice for protecting yourself right now.
The best way right now, so Public Health Agency of Canada has some really good guidelines for what to do when you're in with spending time with vaccinated people and unvaccinated people. Obviously, vaccination is important. Everyone should get that. If you're over 70, get that third booster before you spend time with your unvaccinated or under-vaccinated grandchildren. That is essential. We know that kids and the 20-somethings have the highest rates of infections right now. So the holiday seasons are a bit of a time bomb. If you've got grandma and grandpa who have waning immunity and they're hugging their grandkids who either are too young to be vaccinated or only have 1 dose. That's key. The second thing is make good decisions about your socialization. If you're with people who are under-vaccinated, so your kids who only have 1 shot, or people who are unvaccinated, and you've got an immunosuppressive condition, if you're older, if you're not vaccinated yourself, those masks, distancing, open windows, these things are all really, really essential. So I encourage people to go to the Public Health Agency of Canada. They've got a nice infographic on what to do if you're vaccinated and you want to spend time with other vaccinated people or unvaccinated people, or a mix of both, and what's safe and what's not.
So again, that was moments ago here on City News. Dr. Dawn Bodish from the Firestone Institute, part of St. Joe's Healthcare down in Hamilton. She's also a professor of medicine at McMaster University. For a lot of people in her position, researchers in this area of science, they had been warning us that this was going to happen as long as there was vaccine inequity, as long as rich countries enjoyed high vaccination rates, but that was not the case in poorer countries.
To be honest, this was the most predictable thing that has happened during this pandemic. We all said very clearly, very loudly, if we don't get vaccines to everywhere in the world, places where there's lots of infections and, frankly, lots of people who might be partially vaccinated or be immunocompromised, this gives the virus a chance to live in those people, to live in those communities, to develop mutations that may help with spread or may help evade partial immunity. So even where the mutations occurred in the virus were what we predicted would happen if we didn't get vaccines out to the rest of the world.
All right, so that's Dr. Dawn Bodish. So we're going to stop here a little bit early, and when we come back, we believe we're just a few minutes away from this live news conference from Ontario's Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore. This is the Rob Snow Show. I'm Rob Snow, and this is City News.
My name is Pamela Caillou. I'm a local artist. I'm Métis, and the heritage derives from Algonquin and Huron background. That comes from way, way back from the 1600s. I was trained in school classically, like we studied the masters like Picasso, Michelangelo, Van Gogh, and so you'd have to say it's quite different, my style. What I've done is taken the skills that were taught to me by traditional painting and incorporated that with the Indigenous heritage. My art pieces incorporate the energy and spirit of the Mother Earth in pretty much every single one of them, because I want people to realize, even though we might think we are the masters of the domain here on the planet, that is not the case. It's the Mother Earth that's providing a balance and our causes to live and whatnot. And it's just to always see her and remember her and respect her. Well, I try to keep my style different because there are like a handful of Canadian artists that are really well known, like Norval Morrisseau and whatnot, but it's been done. So I kind of want to stay away from the pack, and that's what makes my artwork a little more unique. But at the same time, if you're looking at it, you do know it's Indigenous and you do know it's the woodland style. I usually start by coming up with an idea, which would be, let's say, 4 days. Well, it depends what's inspiring me at the time. It could be a lot of trees, it could be water, it could be the medicine wheel. I would choose a subject and try to really incorporate what it is I want people to see from that. So then from there, I would have sketchbooks and I do little sketches of everything because the canvas is expensive. So you don't want to start something and have to throw it away. And then from there, I go on to the bigger piece on the canvas. Once I have on my sketches the direction I want to take my artwork in. I chose a lot of vibrant colors for the pieces because if somebody is willing to make the commitment to have my piece of work in their home, I would actually like them to come home after a long, hard day, and some days aren't so great, to look at something that's very joyful.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Here is Dr. Kieran Moore, Ontario's Medical Officer of Health, live. This is City News.
High volume capacity for testing with 230 assessment centers and community labs and over 500 pharmacies offering testing to those who need it. In order to rapidly identify and trace and isolate COVID-19 and its variants, we have already expanded eligibility for provincially funded COVID-19 PCR testing at all testing centers to individuals who have returned from or traveled in the following locations between November 1st and December 6th, 2021. South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, Eswatini, Mozambique, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. Asymptomatic family members and other household contacts of travelers are also eligible for testing. This list of travel locations may be updated as we learn more about the new variant and risk globally. Anyone experiencing symptoms of COVID-19, even if they are mild, is strongly recommended to get testing. And achieving the highest vaccination rates possible remains the key to reducing the risk of COVID-19 transmission and significant surges in cases. Please, if you are eligible for a booster dose, book your appointment today or provide yourself with an extra layer of protection. And if you have not yet received the vaccine, please do so as soon as possible. This includes vaccination for children aged 5 to 11. I also continue to urge all Ontarians to remain vigilant and continue following the public health measures and workplace safety measures that have been working for all of us and helped us get through the last 20 months. However, we will continue to monitor trends in key public health and health system indicators, monitor for and learn about this new variant, and we will act quickly in partnership with our federal colleagues if necessary. We continue to be in constant contact with the Public Health Agency of Canada and other jurisdictions to monitor the developing situation and ensure coordinated, effective, and shared efforts to protect the public. I know that this news of the variant feels concerning, but vaccination in combination with public health and individual protective measures has been working to reduce the spread of COVID-19 and its variants in our communities. So please keep up this great work that has got us to this point in the pandemic. We will continue to keep you updated in the coming days and weeks as we learn more about Omicron. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
We'll go to the phone lines for questions. Just a reminder, one question, one follow-up. Over to the first question, please.
Your first question comes from Randy Rath with CHCH-TV. Please go ahead.
Well, hi, Doctor. Thanks for taking my question. I'm wondering, we have some significant steps taking place tomorrow on the COVID front, that the PCR tests will no longer be needed to cross the land border, and the John C. Munro Airport in Hamilton is starting to accept international flights again. Should those moves go ahead, in your opinion, or should they be held back?
Yeah, so we'll have to be reviewing this with our federal partners. We were certainly in contact with them all weekend to talk about a testing strategy for all travelers returning to Canada. We will further review the testing strategy for the short-term travel for 72 hours or less. We'll certainly have to monitor the situation in the United States. I believe the President of the United States will be making an announcement this morning. So you're absolutely right. It's a fluid situation. Most of this is a federal responsibility, but we're at the table voicing any concern by the Ontario government to ensure that we're listened to, but it clearly is a complete federal responsibility on international flights arriving into Canada. As you realize, this is a rapidly changing environment. Lots of questions yet about this new strain that we have to have answers for. We need to understand really if this is a virulent infection, if it makes people significantly sick or leads them to hospitalization. We really don't have that information yet. So I could understand, in an abundance of caution, putting some measures in play like we've done already, and whether as we get more and more information, we put further public health measures in play. I can assure you we'll work with our federal partners to do that.
Okay, and as a follow-up, do we know where these cases in Ottawa came into the country? Did they come to Pearson and then travel to Ottawa, or did they land in Ottawa? Do we know that?
So I don't want to give any identifiable information away, but they did arrive into Montreal. Their testing was initially done in Montreal, and we received the results through partnership with the province of Quebec and the National Medical Lab and the Public Health Agency of Canada. These cases are being monitored very closely by both Public Health Agency of Canada and now Ottawa Public Health, that they've had a positive result. I have great confidence in Ottawa Public Health's case and contact management capacity, and we've been in regular contact with them over the weekend as we do case investigation and monitor these cases. We are investigating other cases, so I would not be surprised if we find more in Ontario, because we've got a very robust surveillance system, a great testing capacity, and as you've heard, our whole genome sequencing capacity in Ontario to do 100% of all positive tests, I think is just brilliant. So I think all Ontarians should be assured we've got good testing, surveillance, whole genome sequencing capacity, and because of that, we will continue to find cases and further protect Ontarians through local public health agencies doing that great day-to-day work of case and contact management.
Your next question comes from Holly Mackenzie-Suter with the Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Moore. I wanted to ask about, I guess, the regional first approach to reintroducing public health restrictions that the province has been sticking to at this point. Like with the variant being in the province, so much we don't know about it and cases going up already. Is that something you would reconsider the approach in terms of, it might be time to reintroduce province-wide restrictions?
Well, we'll certainly keep an eye on all of the data. Right now, we're working with just a couple of health units on further investigation of returning travelers. We've been informed by the Public Health Agency of Canada that we have 375 individuals that have met the case definition of returning in the last 2 weeks from those 7 countries. So all of our local public health agencies are working closely with the Public Health Agency of Canada to contact those individuals, get them tested, and if they're positive, we have good local capacity to respond to them. If we see widespread presence of Omicron across Ontario, which is not the case at present, then we could review any measures that we need to take at a provincial level, as well as certainly work with our public health agency colleagues about limiting the number of international flights potentially to 1 or 2 airports where we could have concentrated testing and assessment capacity.
Follow-up?
Holly, do you have a follow-up? Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I was just wondering about the travel, kind of targeted flight restrictions that are looking at specific countries. So, now that the variant's been detected around the world, and as you said, we'll probably see more of it in Ontario. Do you see a benefit from a science public health perspective to only be investigating certain countries, or is there a better way to handle this?
I think we're learning from the epidemiology of this that it is this virus has been present on the globe for probably many weeks, if not months, and it has spread to multiple locations around the globe, as we're learning every minute of every hour, and it may be more prudent to broaden the testing of all returning travelers to ensure that they can have a take-home PCR test to get that test done and have the results tested for this strain in particular and or the Delta, which is the dominant strain here. So we're working with our federal partners on an enhanced testing strategy. Clearly that's within their domain at the federal airports for returning travelers, but that is one suggestion that we're offering to them, is to expand the testing beyond those 7 countries. We were fortunate to pick up these 2 cases from Nigeria, given that it was part of a random testing strategy, I believe. I would want to have that expanded to a larger proportion of returning travelers, if not targeted to regions of the globe where we're seeing a higher incidence of the Omicron variant.
Next question.
Your next question comes from Rob Ferguson with the Toronto Star. Please go ahead.
Hi, Doctor. Does this mean that you need to look at accelerating boosters, considering that some of the protocols for COVID are, trying to get out ahead of things in a precautionary measure, in a precautionary way?
Well, very good question, Rob. We really have to focus in Ontario right now. 99.something% of all strains are of the Delta variant, and we know the vaccine is very effective against the Delta variant, and we are reviewing any measures we have to take to further prevent Ontarians. We will be reviewing options and providing them to government in the next few days, and I would anticipate an announcement by the end of this week on an enhanced strategy to best protect Ontarians. We have to take into consideration the global epidemic and threats. But to be clear, we don't know the effectiveness of this vaccine against the Omicron variant. But you're seeing daily increasing cases, a slight uptake in the number of cases in the intensive care unit in Ontario, and we should remain focused on the present threat, which is Delta. We know the vaccine is very effective. We know 2 doses prevents admission to hospital at a very protective rate in the mid-90s, and the 3rd dose would only continue to protect Ontarians. So that is absolutely one strategy we'll be reviewing and presenting to government this week. You can anticipate potential acceleration of our 3rd dose strategy.
Follow up.
Thanks, Doctor. And I just wondered if you could go over what some of the other options are then, so that people can be aware of what might be coming.
With Omicron, we're clearly dependent upon the excellent researchers, the scientists, public health officials in Africa, that South Africa in particular, that identified this strain just on November 9th. So this is rapid sharing of information across the globe, and have to thank them for that. We need further information on how well our vaccine works against this strain. We need further information on how well some of the monoclonal antibodies, so some of the therapeutics we have, would work against it. We also need more information on the severity of this virus in terms of its ability to cause severe illness and hospitalization or intensive care unit requirements. All of that information is getting gathered as we speak. We also want to know if the oral antivirals that may be coming soon and available in Ontario would work effectively against that. So the body of science is getting worked on aggressively over the next 2 weeks, and we'll have further clarity on what measures Ontario would need to put in place to best protect. In an abundance of caution, though, we really do need enhanced testing of returning travelers. We're pushing that from the Government of Ontario's perspective, and have testing capacity in Ontario if the federal government mandates enhanced testing to get the situational awareness that we need to best protect Ontarians. But going back to the basics, keeping your social gatherings small, keeping your masks on, your hands clean and washed regularly, physical distancing, all of those measures will work against Omicron and are effective against Delta, plus vaccination. So all of those basics, let's stay with them. We'll keep calm. We'll continue wearing our masks and doing all the basic actions that we know work against COVID-19 until we get further information on this virus, which we anticipate in the coming weeks.
Next question.
Your next question comes from John McGrath with TVO. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Doctor. The current public health measures in Ontario aren't really containing Delta. The cases continue to grow. We're now at the highest level of active cases we've had in months as of today's data. Previous, actually more stringent public health measures didn't do a great job of containing the Alpha variant earlier this year. If this new variant becomes more entrenched, even if it's not as harmful as previous variants, it does seem to be more transmissible. Are we not, by definition, looking at a new round of stricter public health measures than we see in the province?
Good question. Number one, we're seeing a lot of transmission in social networks, and there's a lot Ontarians can do to decrease the number of social contacts that they have. We're seeing a lot of transmission in younger children, and I'm happy to announce for the 5 to 11-year-old age group, as of this morning, we have 6.4% of them protected with their first doses. We've immunized 68,722 children from 5 to 11. Which is a brilliant initiation for this strategy. I hope that volume of individuals continues, so they're best protected going into the holidays times when we can anticipate seeing more cases. The good news in all of this is that the impact on our hospital system is manageable at this point. We have intensive care unit capacity. We're watching those numbers like a hawk, but the length of stay for these individuals in the intensive care unit is getting shorter. There are younger people now in the intensive care unit, sadly, that were not vaccinated for the most part, but their recovery seems to be quicker and their mortality seems to be less. So at the present volume of cases that we have, I would love to see them less and more people vaccinated, but we're doing relatively well. We're less than the national average. We're less than most highly populated provinces. So I have to thank Ontarians for continuing to come forward to get your first, second, or third dose, to continue the measures that you're taking within your social networks and in the workplace, and when you're in transit, those are working for us, and have to acknowledge this is a nasty, formidable foe. It wants to spread as we go indoors. We knew that. But I thank Ontarians that we're able to limit the impact on our hospital sector.
This is City News, Ottawa, 101.1 FM, 1310 AM. This is a live news event with Dr. Kieran Moore, Ontario's Medical Officer of Health.
We will have to see if we can limit the rapidity of spread of Omicron, as well as attenuate or limit its ability to spread in our communities by best adherence to these public health measures. It may be a 2 to 3 month transition if it's more effective than Delta, and we'll have to put in the precautions that are necessary. I don't foresee us having to take any steps back at present. We will, though, need to completely understand if it's more virulent, if it increases the risk for hospitalization. Because if we go back to our pandemic plan has been to minimize the impact, the morbidity and mortality of this strain of viruses on our society, and minimize the mental, physical, social, economic disruption. If it's a less lethal virus, less impact on the hospital sector, and our vaccines can continue to work against it, we will continue our current strategy and not have to have any further public health restrictions. I don't have a complete crystal ball, but we'll have greater clarity in the coming weeks of how, as a province, we would have to respond to this new threat. I do want us all to remain calm, remain science-driven, evidence-informed, and follow the epidemiology of this virus.
Follow-up?
You mentioned impact on the hospital sector. Of course, that's been a crucial variable throughout the pandemic, but there are still more than 350,000 adults 50 and over who have not had a first dose. Even if this variant is no more virulent than prior variants, it's just more transmissible. We're still talking about potentially it could spread more rapidly through these people who are still unvaccinated. That could put pressure on the hospital system. Is there anything that you are looking at? We already have vaccine certificates. We already, control people, unvaccinated people's access to various amenities. Is there anything else you are looking at? Anything that is, any potential policies that are in a drawer somewhere in terms of encouraging that last 5 to 10% of people to get their first doses?
Well, yeah, another great question. Thank you for it. We're looking at additional therapeutics that could be helpful for these individuals that won't get vaccinated. We're also looking at newer vaccines. So the Novavax vaccine, we believe, is getting reviewed by Health Canada. That is not an mRNA or a viral vector vaccine. It's more of a traditional vaccine. We think that might be appealing to a certain percentage of the population that haven't been vaccinated to date. That is a very effective vaccine as well from the preliminary randomized controlled trials. We're also looking at expanding the ability to treat individuals who are unvaccinated with monoclonal antibodies. That they're very effective at limiting the hospitalization and or health system impact. We're also in active conversation to review with our federal counterparts the Merck oral antiviral and the Pfizer oral antiviral. These could help further protect our health system, help reduce the impact of this virus on those that remain unvaccinated, and be important options. And we're working very diligently to have a system in place across Ontario that these therapies could be available as soon as an unvaccinated person is tested to be positive. They could be offered after a clinical assessment. So we're working with our hospital partners, our primary care partners, the pharmacy partners, to ensure that all of those therapeutics would be available and minimize the impact. And we're anticipating somewhere in the first quarter, we hope in early January, to help have some of these tools available at a wide population level basis for those remaining individuals if they do come down with COVID-19. So that alone should protect those individuals and minimize the health system impact. We're not looking at further public health measures or mandates. We're looking at being able to provide the right care at the right time to the right individuals with good therapies that we know will reduce the impact on the individual, but also on the health system.
Last question.
Your final question comes from Linda Ward with CBC News. Please go ahead.
Hi, good morning, Doctor. You mentioned that you were investigating other potential cases of this variant. I'm wondering if you can tell me just how many other possible cases you're looking at and if you have a breakdown by public health unit.
4 other individuals that were waiting for whole genome sequencing results back. 2 are in Ottawa, 2 in the Hamilton area. Their local public health agencies have been working, were informed by Public Health Agency of Canada, have been informed and are doing active case and contact management. We are also trying to do our assurance that the 375 returning travelers from those 7 countries have been contacted and followed up and tested through the Federal Quarantine Act, which is mandating quarantine and mandating testing. So we are in discussions as we speak with our federal counterparts to make sure that those options have been provided and that we get appropriate testing results back in the hands of our local public health agencies to be able to respond if we have more cases. So to me, the system's working. The partnership with our federal colleagues who put in play the Federal Quarantine Act is working, as well as the random testing that has been put in play for returning travelers outside of those 7 countries. We would just like to see it expanded and a more robust testing strategy for returning travelers beyond the 72 hours.
Follow up, and this is the last question.
I'm just hoping you can expand a little bit more on that in the process of finding Omicron in Ontario. So in the past, hearing about the federal government sharing plain manifests with local public health authorities who then go back over the last 2 weeks of test results and look for a specific variant. So just step by step, what's the process for doing that, for tracking this variant down?
Yeah, so the federal government looked at the CanArrive app. They looked for any individuals returning from those designated countries that they ascertained to be the risk countries. Then they shared that information with the provinces. We were given the list that the federal government is investigating, and we will continue to work with them to ensure that all of the individuals have been contacted and tested, and that those individuals are given their results, as well as the respective local public health agency. If there is a positive test of the Omicron or Delta, those individuals, we would inform the federal government. The federal government would investigate the flight manifests and do risk communication to the individuals on the respective airplanes. The federal government responsibility is also to inform the World Health Organization that the Omicron has been detected within Canada, and we work with them to provide the appropriate information to the World Health Organization and the government of Nigeria, where the destination was for 2 of these cases. So it is complex. It involves international, national, provincial, and local partnerships, but from my vantage point, it's working, and it has worked all weekend in a seamless fashion. We just want to assure those 375 are contacted, are offered and provided the testing at a local testing center, and that we can give them their results and protect further the Ontarians against any potential spread at present.
Thanks, everyone.
Dr. Kieran Moore, the Medical Officer of Health for Ontario, and his news conference will recap some of what he said when we return. This is the Rob Snow Show. This will be our talkback hour. We will take your phone calls and get your reaction to all the latest news of the last few days at 750-1310. You feel free to call right now. This is City News.
Talk back
on The Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Okay, it's a day of developing news. You're always welcome to react to it. 750-1310. This is the Talkback Hour, but let me bring you right up to date on everything that's been going on here. First of all, the new case number is out for today for the province of Ontario. We've been keeping track of this, especially a big number yesterday, 960-something, if I recall. Not quite that high today, but still up there. 788 new cases. But as Dr. Moore just said, Dr. Kieran Moore, Ontario's medical officer of health, it's about hospital capacity, and he expressed some confidence in the ability of Ontario's hospitals to deal with these current case counts right now. 32 cases for Ottawa today. 10 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, and we'll have the medical officer of health for the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, Dr. Paul Remiliotis, coming up a little bit later in the program. 10 cases there today. 32 for Ottawa, 10 Eastern Ontario Health Unit, then 5 for Renfrew County. We're hoping to get Dr. Cushman on this week, and he's the medical officer of health for Renfrew County, and 2 in Leeds-Grenville. But Dr. Kieran Moore is the most recent news. He just had his news conference encouraging everyone in Ontario to remain vigilant, but and maintain the public health measures that have served us well over previous waves. Social distancing, wearing masks, getting vaccinated. He said we're going to learn more about this new variant in the coming weeks, and that the government will act quickly, but was confident that vaccination in combination with public health measures will work, that it has been working and it should work here. He was asked about travel restrictions. And I think more than travel restrictions, what he expressed during his news conference was the need to test returning passengers, not just from the countries that have been identified for travel restrictions, the 7 countries that the federal government is focused on. But he eventually said, we will probably get to the point where we're going to have to test all returning travelers. But anything to do with international borders are discussions in the federal domain. But that the immediate need, he said, is enhanced testing of returning travelers beyond the 7 countries identified by the federal government. It's South Africa and 6 other countries: Lesotho, Botswana, Eswatini, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and Mozambique. The 2 Ottawa cases that they know about right now did not involve the Ottawa airport. They arrived in Montreal originally. They were tested in Montreal originally, and the information was relayed to people here in Ottawa by Quebec public health officials, and now the province is working with Ottawa Public Health on that. He was asked about more restrictions, things like lockdowns, capacity limits, business closures, those sorts of things, and whether there would be, if the need arises, a regional approach or a province-wide approach. The preference now is for a regional approach. He was asked, would you reconsider that, going to, say, province-wide restrictions? He said right now the immediate priority is that 375 people have returned recently from the 7 countries that the federal government has identified as being priority countries, and that the need right now is to do contact tracing and track down those 375 people and everyone they've been in contact with. He said that the virus has probably been spreading for many weeks, if not months, and said eventually he thinks the need will arise. They'll have to test everyone returning, not just people from 7 countries. They are reviewing the 3rd dose strategy. And when we had Dr. Dawn Bodish on, she told me this morning she thinks of, when you should cue that clip up, David, if you can find it. She thinks eventually everybody's going to need a third dose. Right now, with the booster shots, it's individuals over the age of 70, born 1951 or earlier, healthcare workers, designated essential caregivers in congregate settings, including individuals who received a complete series of a viral vector vaccine, 2 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine, 1 dose of the Janssen or Johnson & Johnson vaccine. In addition to that, First Nations, Inuit, Métis adults, non-Indigenous household members, but also people I believe who are immunocompromised or who have certain medical conditions. They qualify for a booster shot. But she said she thinks eventually everyone's going to get a third shot.
If you're over 70, get that third booster before you spend time with your unvaccinated or under-vaccinated grandchildren. That is essential. We know that kids and the 20-somethings have the highest rates of infections right now, so the holiday seasons are a bit of a time bomb. If you've got grandma and grandpa who have waning immunity and they're hugging their grandkids who either are too young to be vaccinated or only have 1 dose. That's key. The second thing is make good decisions about your socialization. If you're with people who are under-vaccinated, so your kids who only have 1 shot or people who are unvaccinated.
Okay, so on the third dose strategy, Dr. Moore said we're going to review that. We're going to review that. In other words, when they say they're going to review it, they're probably thinking we're going to expand it. We're going to need to expand it. Get more booster shots into more arms. But one of the themes that comes away from this news conference for me is he's really calling on the federal government to do enhanced testing of returning travelers. He said new, stricter public health measures. He was asked, are new, stricter public health measures on the way, just based on our history of dealing with previous variants and waves? And he expressed confidence, as I mentioned, that hospital capacity is manageable right now. One of the worrying signs is that there are unvaccinated younger people in some Ontario hospitals, but overall, the hospital system is holding up relatively well. He said, I don't see the province having to take any steps back right now, but that there will be greater clarity in the coming weeks, that the province health officials need to remain calm and stay science informed. He was asked about the hundreds of thousands of adults that are still not vaccinated, despite there being things like employment restrictions on unvaccinated individuals or vaccine certificates, for example. These limits that are being placed on unvaccinated individuals. He was asked what else can be done to encourage people to get vaccinated. And he said therapeutics may be an alternative there. Antivirals or the Novavax may be appealing. It's not approved yet, but it is not an mRNA vaccine. It's more of a traditional vaccine, so maybe that will be appealing to people who don't want to get an mRNA vaccine. And then he said they're looking for 4 other potential cases, 2 in Ottawa and 2 in Hamilton, but that they're not confirmed yet, but they're looking at 4 other potential cases. They're waiting for test results right now. So that brings you, I think, nicely up to date right now on everything that has happened in just the last hour and a half. Your reaction, please, to all of this news at 750-1310 on the Rob Snow Show here on City News.
Well, we all loved our rock T-shirts growing up, right? It was our badge. Hey, we went to this concert. We knew that band inside out. So we kept doing that and kept promoting that. What's sort of happening now is that audience is dying. I always say the earth is flat. So the 60s rockers are falling off the end of the earth. So you don't see as big a sales anymore because my audience is disappearing. What's sort of helping to promote that history is the kids are buying vinyl. And luckily we have a vinyl shop in the neighborhood here, Record Center. So what's happening is I've seen kids come in with their dad. And the dad say, hey, do you have any Beatles shirts? Do you have any CBGB? Do you have any of this? I said, well, why? He said, well, because my daughter's into it. She's wearing my T-shirt. So slowly it's coming back, right? The kids are, I think, getting fed up with the generic music that's out there. And they want to click into something that, first of all, links them to their parents. something that they thoroughly enjoy now, and maybe they're passing it on to their grandkids. Pandemic has been a couple of things, definitely hard on everybody. So much messaging that's out there that people don't understand, stats that every day. Jesus, Murphy, like I'm getting a headache just reading this stuff, right? So really it was just trying to understand where we were going to go from there. The city of Ottawa all of a sudden said everybody's got to wear a mask. You got to wear it on the bus. People were scrambling, okay? And I had the store next door had really big windows, so I just flooded the window with masks. Well, that was the activity that saved the business. People were coming in buying 2, 3, 4 masks at a time at $20 a pop here. But my masks were so different. They were the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Queen, all the pop culture. Everything else out there was medical masks. And right, so people said, "Oh, I don't want to do that. I want to show my rock and roll." So it became the new T-shirt, as far as I'm concerned. Well, what I've done, I'm Hintonburg. I'm now at 1114A Wellington Street, which is next door to the Fab Gear store. And the reason I've changed names, I've rebranded the store, is because I was planning on retiring. And in December, I went, "Oh, I'm not going to retire," but I've committed to changing what the store is about. So I came up with a new name, Fab Gear's Rock Shop, where legends are dressed, and essentially get that message out. I prefer, if the shirt don't fit, you come in, you try another one on. People like to feel the fabrics with clothing. It's amazing. You'll come in and go, "Oh, I love that. Oh, can I try this?" So that's the big difference. I'm not out to make a gazillion dollars. I stick the way I am, old school. I take cash, we take cards. Come on in and talk to the owner.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Okay, we're running a little bit behind, but this is the Talkback Hour. I promise you it is the Talkback Hour right now. We have lines available at 750-1310. We have every line available at 750-1310. See, I am of the opinion it's important to get the news before we ask for your views on the news. And now you're all up to date on the news. I'd like your reaction to it. I'd like your views. Rob Snow Show, City News, 750-1310. Omicron in Ottawa. Omicron in Ottawa. Omicron in Ontario. Omicron in Canada. There is an update, by the way, from the health minister in the province of Quebec that was not scheduled for today. It's been called now for 1 o'clock. I suspect, I don't have any insider information, I suspect they're going to say Omicron in Quebec, too. What is your reaction to all of this? This has been in the news now since early Friday morning, and I mean, it is just taken over the news cycle. Is it, in your opinion, a bit too much? Is it overblown media hype? I was talking to a friend of mine this morning. He said, it's way too much overblown media hype. It's not the first variant. It won't be the last variant. Or is this potentially a very worrying sign? Or is it something else altogether? What is it, in your opinion? What I want is your gut reaction. Omicron. What is your gut reaction to this news? Omicron in Ottawa. Because, wow, that escalated fast. Most of us only heard about this new variant on Friday, discovered by scientists in South Africa. 50 mutations and so many unknowns, and worry about increased transmissibility and the ability to evade vaccines. Friday, big sell-off on the stock market, big drop in the price of oil. I got gas for $1.26 this morning. But now oil prices are rebounding, so maybe it's a one-day wonder. But, man, it's the biggest news story in the world right now, and it's here in Ottawa. 2 cases here in Ottawa. 2 people who landed in Montreal, the airport in Montreal, and traveled from Montreal to Ottawa. And maybe 2 more cases in Ottawa, and maybe a couple of cases in Hamilton. They have 4 potential cases, according to Dr. Moore. But that's about all we know right now. That's about all we know right now. Gut reaction, please. Gut reaction to the news. Josie in Stittsville. Josie.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, I find it interesting that it's making such big news now. And maybe it's because, we have cases here. But they discovered this variant in January of this year.
What, the Omicron variant?
Correct.
How do you know that?
Because I've read articles
Really?
That listed all the different variants, and that one was discovered in January. Well, the article that was written was January of this year, and it mentioned that variant that they had already discovered.
They only named it just the other day and gave it this number just the other day.
Well, I don't know, but this article was
Well, you just said you did know.
January. And so, and so it makes me often wonder the timing of things, that they're really making it very well known now when they're trying to push the booster shot. Now, I've got my shots.
Right.
I'm not against them.
Right.
I think there's a place
Would
for
you get
them.
a third one?
No, I haven't yet because
Would
I'm
you,
not
though?
of
Would
the
you,
right
though?
age.
If it was advised, though, would you go and get one? If they said, Josie, you're eligible to get a third shot, would you go and get a third shot?
I would go after Christmas because
After
if
Christmas,
I'm not feeling well after it, I don't want to end up ruining my Christmas holidays.
Okay, all right, okay.
The other thing that's a big pet peeve of mine is on the news when they keep calling it immunization, and it's not. It's a vaccine. And actually, it's not even a vaccine, but we can label it a vaccine.
I don't want to get into your weirdo wackedness. Go away. Darlene in Nepean. Good morning, Darlene.
I concur. Those thoughts go away. Plain stupid.
Yeah. So, what's your gut reaction to this news here, Darlene?
Take it seriously.
Yeah.
Let's get some leadership, which we have sorely been without.
Okay.
I'm not talking about Vera Etches and, certain ones. I mean, in general.
Okay.
They've been suggestions, not rules. How many people have been fined? And my gut reaction is this is very serious.
Very serious. Okay.
Delta virus was serious.
Yeah.
And that very same month, there were, I think, 12,000 people from India that came into Canada. They had been, pre-approved. And these things can't happen. You look at Roxham Road. You look at pharmacies. They're doing COVID testing, and they're giving people vaccines. Wrong.
Oh, in the pharmacies. Yeah. Doing testing in symptomatic testing in pharmacies. Symptomatic testing in pharmacies. Yeah.
And
I do question the wisdom of that myself, darling. Yeah.
But we do need leadership, and we do need rules.
Well, I think Dr. Moore, if he has to be diplomatic, obviously, but he's saying, well, I think we should be testing everybody who's coming into the country, not just testing people from these 7 countries, right? It's well beyond these 7 countries now, darling, who have these cases.
In
right?
the UK, Israel, I believe.
Oh, Scotland, the Netherlands, all kinds of places. Yeah, sure. And, who knows what the list will be by the end of business today, darling.
If you don't do everyone, you're playing Russian roulette.
All right, darling. Thank you for your call. Thank you. Yep. We'll be right back. 10:30 news coming up. The very latest news with Andrew Boyle. This is City News.
101 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, November 29th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, -5 degrees. And here's what's making news this hour. The province is currently investigating 4 more potential cases of this COVID variant, Omicron. There are 2 confirmed cases in Ottawa. Now, both these people had traveled to Montreal from Nigeria. They were tested at Trudeau Airport, the results sent to the province. Now, 2 other Ottawa cases and 2 in Hamilton are being further investigated. A researcher at McMaster University tells the Rob Snow Show this variant was highly predictable. Dr. Don Bodish says areas of the world with low vaccination rates are going to spawn COVID variants. And that's what has happened in the southern part of Africa with 7 countries now, the suspected source of this one. Tomorrow, the new international travel rules take effect. Dr. Kieran Moore, the province's chief medical officer, says while it is a federal responsibility, the province is in contact with the federal government. Tomorrow, anyone coming back from an American trip of under 72 hours in duration will not have to get a PCR test. Today, 788 new cases of COVID across the province. Ontario says 32 of these new cases are in Ottawa, 10 are in Eastern Ontario, 5 are in Renfrew, and 2 more cases in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. There have been 3 more deaths in Ontario as well in the past 24 hours from COVID-19. City News Time, 10:33. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Omicron in Ottawa. 2 cases, they're looking at 2 more, plus 2 more in Hamilton. Your reaction, please. It's all over the news. What's your gut reaction to this news? I mean, what do we really know? I only know what I read in the news, and most of what I read in the news says we don't know much. We'll need a few weeks. We don't know what all of these mutations mean. We don't know if it's easier to spread the virus. We don't know if it causes more severe illness. That would lead to more hospitalizations. That could lead to more deaths. We don't know if it can evade the current immunity provided by the current portfolio of vaccines. We don't know how long it would take the world's drug makers to come up with a new vaccine. The CEO of Moderna said a few months. He was on CNBC this morning and said a few months. So, I mean, that's a lot of stuff that we don't know, right? And yet my news feed is just like filled with stories with the Omicron variant. I mean, the likes of which I haven't seen in a long, long time. But I think it's very much a waiting game right now. It's very much a waiting game. Let's go to, is it Claude or Clyde? Claude?
Clyde.
Clyde. Okay, yeah. Clyde. Yeah. Good morning, Clyde.
Yeah, good morning, Rob. Long-time listener and first-time caller.
Appreciate the call, sir. Yep.
What I'm calling you about, I have a number of grandchildren in minor hockey.
Okay.
And I recently, on this subject, I sent an email to Public Health this morning. I don't really understand that, well, we got the kids back on the ice, which is great. I don't really understand why these hockey associations are sending these kids all over the map on tournaments. On the past weekend, I had one grandson in the Quebec City area for 3 days, had another grandson in Whitby for 3 days, and of course, kids are staying in hotels and restaurants and so on during their off-ice town, and a lot of protocols fall by the wayside. Now, this weekend, I got a grandson headed, 10-year-old, up to Hamilton. Now, what the hell are they doing sending these unvaccinated kids up to Hamilton or any city for 3 or 4 days and then bringing them back Sunday, right up to school on Monday morning, and whatever the heck they pick up there, and the next thing you know, they're crying because they got to close schools. So why are these hockey associations permitted by Public Health to actually undertake those kinds of things?
Very interesting, Clyde. So you're afraid they may be playing with fire here.
Well, if what everybody is telling me on the news and everything else, I think they are.
Okay. All right, Clyde, thank you. Thank you, sir. Okay. Yep. Interesting perspective. 750-1310 lines available. Mark, you're on City News. Mark.
Well,
what's your reaction to this news, Mark? Gut reaction. Give it to me.
At the start of this segment of the program, you mentioned all the things you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And the nature of virus is that by the time you do know, and you know that it's dangerous, it's too late to stop it, which is why they have to issue all these warnings. And let's pray that they turn out to be alarmist. It was about 2 years ago at this very time, we were hearing an obscure story about some kind of virus breaking out in Wuhan, China.
Yeah.
The fear was, the worst that could happen was it would be a repeat of SARS in 2003, which did spread around the world and cause fatalities, but it did not shut down society. Not on this scale, not in our country. So my reaction is, let's hope it turns out to be, they have to issue these warnings before they get confirmation of the worst, and hope it turns out to be unnecessary. And as I say, we could only...
Erring on the side of caution. Erring on the side of caution.
Well,
right?
the nature of it is that if it is deadly, the time frame for stopping it is long before the thing has proven itself to be deadly. And so that, again, crucial time was lost at the end of 2019, early 2020, when it might have been able to contain the spread of COVID-19. It could have kept it from getting as far as it did, but it didn't appear to be that dangerous at that time to the mass public.
Yeah. Okay, Mark, thank you. Bill in Toronto. Bill, gut reaction to this news, Bill.
Well, your last caller, there's exactly the outcome of this. They've got everybody so scared.
Right.
It doesn't matter what, they'll give up their freedoms, they'll give up their liberties. It's just like, okay, yep, lock it down, do whatever the government
Well, nobody's talking about lockdowns. In fact, Dr. Moore said we don't anticipate having to take any steps back, is what he said during his news briefing.
Well, is all I can say is they generally, how much of this have they gotten right over time? Generally, they've been wrong all the time.
Okay.
And honestly, I feel like we're cats and they've got the laser, the media and the government. It's just, every once in a while, especially when it goes into the fall, they start shining that laser around and we all go running.
Okay.
I don't trust government.
Right.
And I trust mainstream media even less.
Okay. And yeah, you listen to me all the time, Bill.
Well, you're relatively speaking, you're one of the better shows where you get some information. And
Critical thinking is not dead, Bill. Critical thinking is not dead. Okay, let's go to the question period in the Ontario legislature. It's just starting right now, and there are questions about this, okay?
At that time, the Minister of Labour...
This is Andrea Horvath, leader of the New Democrats, opposition.
To ensure that we continue to get people vaccinated as quickly as possible and protect workers sick from this virus. While the same threat is with us today, Speaker, and it seems to be getting worse, will the Premier be extending paid sick days beyond December 31st and making them permanent for Ontario workers?
And to reply, the government House Leader.
The question from the Leader of the Opposition. Of course, as the Opposition Leader will know, that we took steps immediately when COVID-19, at the beginning of the pandemic, to ensure that our workers who were impacted by COVID-19 were protected. Speaker, we also, as you know, the Premier negotiated an over $1 billion program of paid sick days with the federal government. We're going to continue to work with the federal government to ensure that programs to support Canadians throughout COVID continue to happen, Mr. Speaker, and we'll continue to ensure that workers have access to paid sick days. Thank you.
And the final supplementary.
Well, Speaker, regardless of the recasting of history, we do have an important opportunity now to do the right thing moving forward. 17 schools have closed due to COVID-19. 712 schools have reported cases. Sudbury, Kingston, and Algoma are responding with new restrictions. New variant Omicron is already here in Ontario, as I've already mentioned, and has been acknowledged by the Minister of Health. So the question is, will the Premier commit to extending paid sick days beyond December 31st?
The Premier's not in the legislature this morning. He is not in the legislature this morning. Corey in Ottawa. Corey, good morning, Corey.
Hi, good morning, Rob.
Omicron in Ottawa. What do you think of that? Omicron in Ottawa.
Well, it's not as fearful as you're making it out to be, and everybody else, too.
Okay.
Like your listener, Jose, was trying to say to you over, a conversation. You just eliminated thousands of people, even in the Ottawa area, of her opinion. They think just like she does. And if you want to continue on the road of making a mountain out of a molehill,
Do you think that's what I'm doing? A mountain out of a molehill? A mountain out of a molehill? Or?
Well, it's out there.
Yeah.
It's out there. Yeah, coronavirus is out there. And like your other listener says, I don't trust any news anymore. I don't trust what they say anymore.
Okay.
I don't think they're
Well,
taking
that's
the
one
right
of the
act.
questions that I'm asking you. Is all of this overblown hype? That's one of the questions I'm being fair and asking. Is it all a bunch of media overblown hype?
Well, Jose, your other listener was trying
No,
to
she was
talk
getting into
something.
anti-vax stuff, and I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. She was First of all, she said she was reading a news story that Omicron came out in January of last year. No, it didn't.
On the news, Rob, they've been saying it since January. Look out, a new variant is coming.
But not this one. Not this
How
one.
are they supposed to predict the future to call it Omicron or whatever, but they coming in January?
Right.
They knew something was coming because that's how viruses act.
Yes.
Naturally.
Yes.
They change. They have to survive somehow, so they're going to change.
And then she
Because
started
a
getting
viral
into
thing,
all
not
these
a
vaccines. They're
bacterial
not even
thing.
real vaccines. She was talking about all these vaccines are not even real vaccines. And I wish people would stop saying to themselves that they're immunized. I don't have the time for any of that
People
nonsense.
believe exactly
Well,
what
you know what? They can get their own radio shows then if they think that. Because that's just a bunch
of.
of.
You want to muzzle half of your listeners, that's fine.
Well, I don't need listeners like that who think like that.
Well, maybe
With
you
all due
don't, but
respect.
people do listen to you.
Yeah.
And want their opinion heard just like everybody else. So now you're the king of censorship.
No, I'm
right?
not a king of censorship at all. I'm not.
You
She
said
had
I
her
don't want
say. She had her
listeners, or I
say.
don't want people on
She
my
had her
show
say.
like that.
She had her say. She was on the air for 3-4 minutes.
Well, you got rude and you said, no, I don't like that, don't like this, and you cut her off.
Yeah. I
That's
did.
right.
And
That's
it's
right.
not the first time that's happened, and it won't be the last time that happens either.
Well, a lot of your listeners are very intelligent people, and just because you don't agree with her, it doesn't
No,
mean she doesn't have a point to make.
Well, I didn't like the point that she was making.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So you're not right. If she's not right, then who's right?
I guess
Rob,
it's
have
you,
a good
Corey.
day, bud.
All right, bud. Yeah, okay. Look. Maybe I broke my own rule and I disagreed and I was disagreeable. I try not to be like that. But if you think it's a bunch of overblown hype, you can tell me it's a bunch of overblown hype. You won't be the first even to tell me this morning that it's a bunch of overblown hype. We've taken 3-4 calls like that. I've had conversations off the air. People think it's a bunch of overblown hype. Even Dr. Bodish, one of the most respected researchers in the province, said this is entirely predictable that we have this variant. But don't start veering off into all kinds of anti-vaxxer nonsense. Because I've been doing COVID-19 radio shows coming on 2 years, and my patience is like paper thin for that kind of stuff at this stage of the game. Rob Snow Show, City News.
The food cupboard started about 25 years ago. Again, it was a very small operation in the basement of a church. And we have been expanding to the point where we needed to have a new facility. So in discussion with the city of Ottawa, and Jan Harder, the local representative here, we came to this location, which is about 2,000 square feet, located in the Walter Baker Center. We've been here for about 2 years, and it is much better. It gives us a much broader opportunity to serve our clients better. It's a fairly affluent community in Barrhaven, so you wouldn't think that people would really need to have a food bank or a food cupboard. But people sometimes have a temporary loss of their job, maybe new immigrants or refugees to the community. Maybe there's been an injury in the family or something like a pandemic that causes people to run short of food during their monthly requirements. So we offer any clients who come and live in our catchment area the opportunity to pick up an order of food every 3 or 4 weeks. The need varies from time to time. We have expanded our offering to include quite a few perishables, eggs, milk, cheese, yogurt, vegetables, fruit. But people, I think, know that we need cans of beans and stuff as well too. One thing that we're consistently short of sometimes is personal hygiene products. You go to the grocery store, you buy your toothpaste and you buy your deodorant and shampoo there. People don't automatically think that to donate those kinds of things to a food cupboard. So we end up buying quite a few of those things from time to time. The pandemic has affected us like it has everybody. Initially, we had to stop the grocery store food donations so that we didn't have any risk of contamination and to have a significant number of volunteer work to be done in our facility. We have a storefront, so it's like a mini grocery store where you take a cart and you go around and pick out the things that you want. That doesn't work during the pandemic to maintain social distancing and so on. So what we have now is our clients can come in one at a time, they make an appointment, they stand behind a line, and they direct our volunteer to, I'd like Kellogg's Corn Flakes rather than Harvest Crunch, to pick the food that they would like off the shelves according to the allocation, depending on the size of their family. And then they take it out, load it into their vehicle or whatever, bring back the cart, we disinfect everything, and prepare for the next client. We are very blessed here in Barrhaven. We're a totally volunteer organization. So if you give a dollar to us, it goes to purchasing food or to provide some service to our clients.
On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Omicron in Ottawa. Gut reaction to this news. Some people say overblown media hype. Others quite worried about it. Jordan in Greeley. Jordan, you're on City News. Good morning.
Hey, Rob.
Hey.
You're a patient man, my friend. I appreciate you.
We're just trying our best around here. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it's, I didn't know what to think at first, but now just over the weekend, seeing how widely it's spread, it seems like it's been around for a while now, or it must have been. So from my layman's perspective, I think it's a bit overblown.
Okay.
I understand why maybe it's a little bit overblown, but if it was something more dangerous, if it was killing more people, I think they likely would have picked it up sooner rather than now. But
right. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I think. I mean, maybe it makes sense to overblow it at a certain point. I just hope we don't overreact policy-wise.
Well, yeah, even Dr. Morris said it's probably been around for weeks, if not months, is what he said during.
Oh, he did. Okay, interesting. I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good news. Maybe it's glass half full. Maybe it's more contagious and less deadly, and I don't know. Maybe it'll lead to more immunity in the end. But we got
Jordan.
A little bit overblown.
A little bit overblown. Okay, thank you. Let's go to Darren Barrhaven. You're on City News. Good morning, Darren.
Good morning. How are you today?
Well, we're hanging in there, Darren. Thank you, sir. Go ahead. What's your reaction to this news about the Omicron variant? It is like consuming the news cycle here.
Yes, well, I'm thinking that it might actually be moronic. If you spell that word differently, it can spell moronic as well.
Yes, it does. Yeah, I saw that on Twitter this weekend. Yeah.
Oh, did you? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
No, it seems like everyone focuses on the scared aspect of it. We don't know this and we don't know that, but we do know that it's a less than 2% death rate. So it's unfortunate that people pass away, obviously, from a cold virus. But in other words, why are we ruining pretty much the whole world just to try to stop?
That's what you think is going on? Yeah.
Well, anyway, it's frustrating that you get a ray of hope that it might be over, and then they come up with this stuff, a new variant that's...
Well, I mean, what do you mean they came up with it? Who came up with it? What do you mean came up with it?
Just I don't know if it's the media or the doctors, but they're pretending like it's scary, but they don't really know anything about it yet, right? But they release the news to the world that there's this new variant to produce more paranoia, I would think.
You think,
anyway,
the agenda is to produce paranoia? You think there's an agenda, let's scare the heck out of people? Do you think that they actually, on purpose, that's what they're doing? Or
it's hard to understand when it's a 2%. It's almost
maybe they're just but maybe they're just saying, look, there's this new variant. We don't know if it causes more severe illness. We don't know if it has increased severity. But it has 50 different mutations, and that kind of freaks us out. And we want you to know about it.
Well,
might just be that, Darren. You know, there doesn't have to be a nefarious motive behind everything that's delivered in the news media. And if there was, my gosh, like what an exhausting job that would be. Brendan, Blackburn Hamlet, you're on City News.
Good morning. I cannot believe that it's going to take a few weeks before we know anything about the Omicron. And,
Omicron, yeah.
And it's going to take time for scientists to find out what the variant does to people. They say it could be flu-like, and they have no scientific evidence yet. It's going to take a couple of weeks, but we have to be careful. You know, we have to really believe in science. I mean, you look at how it's spreading across Europe.
Yes. Now, it's still the Delta variant is still the dominant variant in many, many places. And the problems that are happening in some European countries like Germany is having an awful time. You know, Austria, they have a lockdown. They have much lower vaccination rates than we do, Brendan.
Yeah,
that's really. But what Dr. Kieran Moore, Ontario's medical officer of health, said during his news conference is remain calm and remain science informed. That's what he said. Yeah.
They may come up with a pill for this variant.
Well, that is one of the things that people are looking at. We're so focused on vaccines, but in a high vaccination country like Canada, maybe a vaccine for a new variant, maybe something like that's not needed, and it could come down to, oh, you've tested positive for COVID, here, take this pill. Right? Or you have symptoms of COVID, this is the pill that alleviates a therapeutic.
I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about Omicron there.
Yeah, Omicron. Yeah, the new variant of COVID-19. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Brendan. Yeah. The one thing that Dr. Bodish warned us about this morning here on the Rob Snow Show was that those are very time sensitive, that an antiviral's effectiveness can have a time limit to it because of the way that a virus can mutate. We've learned a lot this morning already. Ron in Dunrobin, good morning. You're on City News. Ron.
Good morning, Rob. Hope you're well.
I'm well. I'm
thinking this is quite a bit overblown.
Overblown, okay.
And the lady that called before, that B11529, which is now called Omicron, was known since June of 2020. What?
June of 2020?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ron, you're breaking up there, buddy. Breaking up. I did not hang up on him deliberately, David. He was breaking up. His cell phone was breaking up. Rodney, good morning, Rodney. You're on City News.
Good morning.
Yeah. What do you think about this, Rodney? Let's get into it, buddy. We only got a few minutes left.
Hey, first thing, I thought you were very patient with the woman that some of the people disputing about. Because when she mentioned to you that she wasn't going to get her booster until after the Christmas holidays because she didn't want to ruin her Christmas holidays, nobody pointed out to her that she might be ruining other people's Christmas holidays.
Okay. What?
You know? Yeah. And then right now, you know, whether it's overblown or not overblown, what's not overblown is the fact that as we started opening up, we were around 400 cases a day. Now we're around 800 cases a day.
788, the number today. It was more than 900,
that's pretty
yes.
close, and it would be a lot better to be at 400 cases or less by Christmas.
Yeah, a month ago we were around 350.
Yeah, and that's when our changes, when we opened up, and unfortunately, when we opened up with the long-range projection of no masks, no distancing, you know, things just have got a lot worse out in the public. Now, you asked ICU nurse a very good question a while back about people there and what she thought of people that were in the ICU that were unvaccinated. You know, there was another very good question you could have asked her. If she goes out shopping and how she feels and what she sees when she's out in the public. And I asked somebody at the Heart Institute that last week, and she expressed that the stores were sort of like a blank show. She wouldn't even use that word in front of me that I can't use on your radio station.
Well, let's end our conversation there and end our conversation for the hour. Very, very trying hour for the Talkback Hour. But I think this topic is going to be with us for some time to come. Omicron, biggest story in the world, biggest story in town. And a complete newscast from our news team here at City News is coming up right after the news. And then it is Dr. Paul Remiliotis, the Medical Officer of Health for the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. We'll get one of the views from one of our top medical officers of health here in Eastern Ontario. This is the Rob Snow Show, and this is City News.
WW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, November 29th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, -5 degrees. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. 4 more suspected cases in our province of the Omicron variant of COVID-19. Now, 2 of them are in Ottawa, 2 are in Hamilton. We've also received a little more information about the 2 confirmed cases in Ottawa of that variant. The 2 people arrived in Montreal from Nigeria and were tested there. The 2 then traveled to Ottawa. Their test results, positive for the variant, were sent to Ontario. Now, the province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore, says they're also in contact with the federal government over the new travel rules internationally that come into effect tomorrow. At least they're scheduled to. That is the lifting of the PCR test for anyone returning to Canada if they spent less than 72 hours in the United States. Moore says international travel rules are strictly a federal responsibility. The doctor says they're in the process, as are other jurisdictions around the world, of getting more information about this variant, how quickly it spreads, how dangerous it is. One researcher at McMaster University tells the Rob Snow Show it was the most predictable thing in this pandemic. Don Bodish says areas of the world that are not well vaccinated against COVID-19 are going to spawn these variants. That has happened with this one. Vaccines are the key, and as for the idea of a booster shot, Dr. Bodish says that should happen for everyone.
Really getting permanent good memory. These mRNA vaccines far exceeded expectations for how well they work, especially in older people, but they do seem to wane pretty quickly. So we definitely want the over 60s to be next in line to get their booster, and I strongly suspect by this time next year, everyone will have their third shot.
Bodish says most immunization regimens, like HPV and hepatitis, for example, do have 3 doses. We'll have more on this variant of COVID-19 coming up in a moment. City News Time, 11:02. There are 788 new cases of COVID-19 across the province today. Ontario says 32 of the cases are in Ottawa, with 10 in Eastern Ontario, 5 more in Renfrew, and 2 new cases in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. There have also been 3 more deaths from COVID-19 registered. The province says 3.5% of the 20,000 tests done for these numbers came back positive. City News Time, 11:03, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
It's a cool start to our Monday. The high today just -1. Sun and cloud do have a chance of a few flurries, though. Tonight, mainly clear, -8, and tomorrow, some flurries in the afternoon. Light snow with a strong wind for Tuesday evening. High tomorrow, +1. For today, the high, -1.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's -5 degrees. Now, doctors in South Africa say most patients they are treating with this new COVID variant have mild symptoms, and they're also not being hospitalized. A general practitioner says 81% of the new cases have been reported, and they have seen a sharp increase in the new COVID-19 cases just in the past 10 days. Most patients have flu-like symptoms. The doctor says he has observed the vaccinated are faring much better than those who are unvaccinated. 2 years after financier Jeffrey Epstein's suicide behind bars, a New York City jury is set to begin to determine the central question in a long-running sex trafficking case. At issue is whether Epstein's longtime companion, Ghislaine Maxwell, acted as his chief enabler, recruiting and grooming young girls for him to abuse. 4 women claim the British socialite and Epstein victimized them as teens, allegations Maxwell has called absolute rubbish. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Dr. Paul Remiliotis is the Chief Medical Officer of Health for the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. Joins me this morning here on City News. Good morning.
Good morning.
What is your reaction to news that the Omicron variant is in Eastern Ontario?
Not surprised. I believe that it just shows that we are able to identify it very quickly. I mean, this was just discovered and shared with the world on Friday. I'm not surprised at all. I heard that we have 2 in Eastern Ontario in the Ottawa area, 2 more in Hamilton, so we know that 13 or 14 other countries have it. I'm also not surprised, and I heard one of your guests before speak about the fact that the mutations as well were not at all surprised because of the fact that in under-vaccinated countries like South Africa, where 3 out of 4 people are not vaccinated, the virus has a great chance of spreading from one person to another. And viruses work that way. What they do is they infect our bodies, they use our cells to multiply, and then they try to find ways to survive. So they mutate, and by offering them many people, the chance of a mutation goes higher. So there's 2 things that we need to look at the local level. Number one, let's not lose track of the fact that we're still got Delta variants. With the cases that you reported, 788 were all Delta at this point, with the exception of the 4. And so the vast majority is Delta cases. We know that the vaccine works against Delta. We suspect that it probably will work against Omicron, although the jury's out on that one. And so the bottom line is we're still going to concentrate on Delta. We need to get the third doses in. There's going to be, I'm sure, an announcement this week as to extending or speeding up the eligibility, going down to 60 plus and so on, and let's get the kids done 5 to 11 so we can have a much higher rate of protection in our area as compared to South Africa. The other thing too, Rob, is the fact that they were saying, well, we don't know the severity. I think that physicians have spoken out and say the severity is not that bad. It's very mild, and it spreads much more easily than the Delta variant does. However, if you're looking at spread in a population that's 25% vaccinated versus spread in a population that's 90% vaccinated, you can see that there'll be a difference.
So you suspect then that the booster shot campaign is going to be expanded, and it may be expanded in short order. Is that right, Dr. Paul?
Yes. I think that what we're trying to do is we're seeing, maybe some evidence of it wearing off between the 6 and 8 month interval.
Yeah.
And so I think that it will be, I'm actually sure that it will be expanded. It's just a matter of timing. And so stay tuned. I think that we'll be starting to roll it out likely 60 plus, and then move backwards by ages. I think that's a great the strategy that will bolster our foundational immunity that we have, will increase it and keep the statistics as they are right now. Majority of patients hospitalized, majority of patients in the ICU, like vast majority of patients in the ICU, and the majority of patients dying, unfortunately, are the unvaccinated.
Right. So, because I had Dr. Bodish on from the Firestone Institute at St. Joe's in Hamilton, one of the top researchers in immunology, Canada Research Chair, who said she thinks it's inevitable everybody will get a third shot eventually.
Yeah, I agree.
You agree?
It's just a matter of how quickly we can roll it out and how quickly we can balance between, finishing our first and second doses, in terms of bringing that up there, finishing our first and second doses, between 5 and 11s, and then start progressively decreasing age groups, and which I do believe, like I said, within this week, there will be an announcement where we'll start moving backwards. To what rate? It depends on how quickly we can get it out, and how quickly we can get the, our logistic operations up to that, which we can do very quickly.
So you're there in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, where you're close to borders, for example, right? So, Dr. Moore, during his briefing, really wanted to emphasize that he thinks right now they're doing testing from these 7 countries for returning travelers, and he seemed to be of the opinion that if we're going to accelerate something, we need to accelerate that and probably test all returning travelers from everywhere.
I don't disagree, because it has spread to multiple countries, so you can't guarantee that somebody from UK or other countries that already have it doesn't.
Well, if it's here, it's got to be in New York State, you would think, right?
For us, it would be it's got to be in the States. I don't think we've heard anything from the States yet, but it's inevitable that you're going to hear cases reported in the United States as well. So we need to test. The bottom line is that there needs to be stringent testing at the border. There needs to be stringent, obviously, avoidance of those flights, restriction of those flights, and very, very good control of who's coming back, who's a Canadian citizen coming back from the countries that we know. But in general, I do agree that we should go back to testing everybody, and to just until we have a bit of a better idea of where this virus stands. Is it more vaccine resistant? Is it more severe? Is it spread more easily? So once we get those questions, we should be as prudent as possible.
It was also revealed that even just from these 7 countries, they now have 375 people who have arrived in Canada from these 7 countries recently, and now they have to do all this contact tracing related to that. Give us a sense, like in a health unit like yours, how well equipped you are these days to do contact tracing.
We are We are very well equipped. We struggle sometimes, but we have a team that will do contact tracing as required. In fact, over the weekend, we received names of individuals in our area that have traveled to those countries already, and we're already on it. So we're able to do that. We're able to do the contact tracing. That's part and parcel of what we do. There will be likely a more enhanced approach, a more intensified approach to following up individuals with suspected, Omicron, but we're able to do that. Sometimes we struggle because it takes a lot of manpower, but we can do it.
Okay, so 788 cases reported today, province-wide, more than 900 yesterday, 10 reported today for your health unit, 10.
Yeah.
How does that compare to a month ago?
Much better. I have to tell you, over the
much
weekend,
better. Okay. Oh.
Yeah, over the weekend we had 24 cases in total, but I must say that 16 of those were from one outbreak, one workplace outbreak, and so that I consider that a bit different because that's a cluster of cases. Our caseload, our 7-day average has gone down dramatically as if we compare it from the middle of September to the sort of beginning of October. We had at that point case rates in about 125 range, particularly in the Cornwall area, which was under-vaccinated. We had at that point 30 hospitalizations and about 8 or 9 in the ICU. Wow. Right today, what we're looking at a case rate of less than about 30 or so, and we're looking at actually 2 admissions in the hospital and a handful of outbreaks as compared to what we were. So we are getting a sort of week-by-week increase of cases, but overall, if you compare us to what we were a couple of weeks ago, we are we're better. Although, like I said, we're like the rest of the province, we're creeping up. Not unexpected, however. There's a disconnect between the number of cases that we get and the number of hospitalizations, which is what we want to see.
Yeah, there's a disconnect there.
Yeah.
Right? There's a disconnect.
Big disconnect.
We are close to 1,000 cases province-wide, but the hospital situation seems to be pretty well in hand. Would you agree?
It is. Our major point, what we want to do, obviously, we want to protect our acute care system, and we don't want to overwhelm it. Yeah. And so, having reached almost 1,000, we're a couple of hundred, I think it's 200 admissions and 130 ICU admissions. By the way, 7 of which are still from Saskatchewan. So, those are flat. When I look at the curve, I've got it actually right in front of me right now, and I'm seeing the curve, in terms of the numbers of hospitalizations, and it's been flat now. As very strikingly, I want to sort of underscore, is the active cases in long-term care homes. It's unbelievable. The line has flattened, and that is a tribute, in my opinion, because we're getting some increases around a couple of months ago because it was starting to wane off. We vaccinated 3rd dose all our long-term care facilities, and you could see the line is completely flat. Good. Which is good news.
Okay. How would you describe the uptake for childhood vaccines for COVID?
Well, so far we've had a very good uptake. We've had most of our appointments. We initially put out 3,000. Most of them are done. We've got 6,500 available. Don't forget, I've got 16,000 kids in my area that are 5 to 11. So we do believe that between now and the end of the year, we'll have done at least half of them, which is what we expected. Surveys have told us that probably around 50% of the population will come out right away and get vaccinated. The rest will wait and see. That's why we do a lot of work. We have a lot of online resources. I'm doing town hall tonight, town hall on Wednesday, just to answer people's questions. I'm also a pediatrician, so I give that, I'm able to understand the questions and where they're coming from. Mm-hmm. And so we believe that we'll probably get up to that 75-80% range, which is what we've attained with the 12 to 17-year-olds, at least.
Right. Okay. So with less than a month to go before Christmas, how worried are you about socializing and family gatherings?
Well, given that even before Omicron, I was saying to my staff and whoever cared to listen to me that we should still be a bit careful. We're still not out of the woods yet. We're still living in a pandemic. Our numbers are creeping upwards. Let's try to do as much as we can to, have a bit of a different one. Vaccinated people can get together much more easily, and no masks and so on, but don't overdo it. I know the limit limit is 25. Try to keep it as minimal as possible, and just try to just tie just a bit more. We need another couple of weeks until we start vaccinating third doses in the kids, where we can be a bit more confident to really remove some of the restrictions. So I'm confident that you can do that. Be a bit more have a more socializing than we did last year, but we should still be aware that there is virus circulating, and I guess the scare or the threat of the Omicron, which again I'm not sure how much of a threat it is, but that the fact that it's there is yet another reason to persist along those lines.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Paul.
No problem.
Nice to hear from you. Dr. Paul Remiliotis is the Chief Medical Officer of Health for the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
It's a space that needs to be lived in. It's a space that people, have to have an experience of more than just art on the walls. I think, yes, the art on the walls is fun, and it's fun to walk around and see all the beautiful things, and the way Dominic and Edith have curated the gallery is certainly something worth seeing. But coming by and asking questions, again, to Dominic's point of view is, interrupt him, ask questions. I'm here on most of the days too. We have Luce that comes in, Nancy that comes in. So yeah, we have quite a few opportunities for people to come in and see the process, and of course ask a few questions. It's a great space. Basically, the one event that we did do, is the jazz shows, the jazz and blues shows. And I think the weird thing to let you know is that the acoustics in here are really amazing. I think that was the first thing that blew me away when we started doing shows, or when I was helping out with the shows. The other part of the business too is we do rent it out for special occasions too. So a few weddings, birthday parties, product launches, that kind of thing. So they're also a lot of fun. We do have one artist that's from the States, but not, of the 30 odd artists, the rest are from either Quebec, Ontario, and one beautiful woman from BC. It's definitely part of the philosophy to maintain and canvas and show the beauty that we have in our backyard. You have the very, very strong personalities in Edith and Dominic, of course. It's wonderful to see how that actually balances out in the rest of the gallery. Without necessarily being, an objective, we basically have half female artists and half male artists in this gallery. But I can't say it's anything more than choosing the best people, and that's just the way it is. And I love that. I think it's great. You go through and you're like, wow, it's all pretty cool. And yep, it's half are women and half are men. It's cool. Like everyone else, we didn't know what to think, right? It's overwhelming at first. You just know that things are closed. And now you're trying to figure out what you do during that downtime, which I think everyone did. And I think in March, the first close, the first shutdown, it was a lot of actually recuperating and resting and not worrying too much on the spot. It's running a gallery is a bit like running a marathon with sprints. So there comes a time where, it's actually nice to just take a break. And then you wake up and realize that, okay, now it's time to wake up and deal with this new reality. From my perspective anyways, I think a gallery can be overwhelming, and I like to make it fun. So you're going to come in, I'll ask you questions, I might even joke around with you. The most people come here, they're not really going to buy art, but they could have a fun time and talk about it, right? And one of the things the gallery does offer is for local purchases, we'll be happy to drive it to your house and hang it for you.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
David Sally's back from the Ottawa Business Journal. Omicron sounds like a startup. It sounds like the name of a startup, Dave.
It kind of does, yeah.
You're our welcome reprieve this morning, my friend. It's great to hear from you. Startup, Telesat is not a startup. Telesat to me is just one of the legacy technology companies, like one of the companies that really put Ottawa on a map as a tech city. And still lots of exciting things going on in that firm. What's the latest with Telesat?
Yeah, well, Rob, as you say, Telesat has been in the news a lot over the last, a little more than probably two years or so. It's for its massive. It's got this huge, ambitious
LEO low Earth orbit satellite project that it calls Telesat Lightspeed. $6.5 billion price tag on that. Rob, and the point of that, of course, is to set up this network of satellites that are much closer to the Earth, 1,000 kilometers, as opposed to 36,000. That'll be able to beam high-speed internet to remote regions where you can't get it right now. But of course, that takes a lot of money to get those things off the ground. And one way to raise money is, of course, through a public offering. Well, Telesat has been laying the groundwork for that for more than a year now, and yeah, so just recently, earlier this month, a week ago Friday, actually, Telesat officially went public on the TSX and NASDAQ as another vehicle, another fundraising vehicle to help it raise more of that $6.5 billion. It's already got a hefty chunk of that in the bank, so to speak, from the federal government and other agencies, but you can always use more. And I talked to Telesat CEO Dan Goldberg last week, and yeah, he just basically said going public, it's going to give Telesat more financial flexibility to raise money. This project, Telesat is really staking a lot of its future on this Lightspeed project, and of course, it's going up against big names. We know SpaceX, backed by Elon Musk. Jeff Bezos has Amazon backing Project Kuiper, which is also in the LEO space. So, and these guys are already they have a bit of a head start. So Telesat is really trying to ramp up and get this thing off the ground, so to speak, and they felt going public was the way to do it. So now they did that essentially through a share exchange with the public company that used to own a big chunk of Telesat called Loral Space and Communications. So Telesat is now Loral, which was the holding company, and the previous Telesat are now subsidiaries of what is known as Telesat Corp, the publicly traded corporation. Right. Okay. The Public Sector Pension Investment Board, also the other main shareholder. That continues to be the case, but they will probably be issuing more new equity as time goes on to help get these satellites in the air. It hasn't been a completely smooth ride. The shares are down about $20 on the NASDAQ since they opened.
They started trading at $45 Canadian. I'm looking at the Canadian here, and then rallied up to 55, which was nice. But then it got sideswiped by the big sell-off, so it's down to $41 Canadian now, so a little below the IPO price, at least in Toronto. So, but one to watch. It's always exciting when a new company hits. Well, not a new company, but there's a new stock listing. So something. Yeah,
absolutely. TSAT, by the way, is the ticker.
TSAT, TSAT. Yeah. Okay. So you and I, you've been reporting for us on Mondays about most of the year, kind of a drought in the venture capital deals for Ottawa, that Ottawa was not even among the top cities in Canada when it came to tallying up venture capital deals for startups. But there's been a flurry of activity, you report, in the last month. Tell us about some of the big deals.
Absolutely, Rob. Yeah, I mean, not too long ago, I was writing about how Ottawa dropped off a major study from CP Analytics. They do a quarterly report 4 times a year, and Ottawa had dropped off their first half venture capital funding report. It wasn't even in the top 10 cities in Canada in terms of raising venture capital. Well, that's changed a lot. Let's just put it that way. In the last, what a difference a few months makes. We've had more than wait for it, Rob, more than $600 million invested in local startups in just the last little over month alone. So this is huge for Ottawa, a team that, a city that maybe people were wondering what's going on, a lot of hand wringing. Well, it's back, maybe when it comes to venture capital. Fullscript The healthcare platform, it got $300 million. One of the biggest rounds.
$300 million. Yeah, that's got to be way up there. Yeah.
Yeah, if not, that might be the biggest round in Ottawa's history. You'd have to go back to the late 1990s, probably during the original .com boom, to see numbers like that. Then last week, GaN Systems. It makes semiconductors out of something called gallium nitride, which are more efficient than the traditional silicon. It got 190 million Canadian. And one of its investors is BMW, which is really keen on using these new semiconductors as they ramp up production of electric vehicles. They really think it'll
semiconductors for electric cars, GaN Systems, $190 million deal.
$190 million, yeah. So they got there. There was a couple of other companies as well. 3Kit, which does 3D imaging software, so you can kind of you can literally almost see the couch the way it'll look in your living room in 3D. It makes software for that. It got $45 million. It's based in Chicago, but it has a lot of R&D here, and its founders from here. You had NAC, which does, which basically makes software that automates the process of doing e-blast, landing pages, that sort of thing. It got 32 million Canadian, and then of course Fellow, which is another startup led by Aidan Mirzahi, who of course we knew he was from SurveyMonkey. He started this company that helps manage meetings to make meetings more efficient.
Oh, right.
They got, they got 30 million. I mean, and those are the big ones over the last few weeks.
Yeah,
I know it's just been amazing, Rob. The money flowing into the National Capital Region here.
Really nice turnaround story there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
3Kit recently raised $35 million U.S. Series B round, led by Leaders Fund. I recognize that name, Leaders Fund, for some reason. I don't know if they've done deals here before, but Leaders Fund, the Leaders Fund. Yeah.
They I think they have invested in perhaps in a couple of other Ottawa companies. And 3Kit is interesting. They've got some other high-powered investors. Steve Young,
the NFL quarterback,
San Francisco 49ers fame, Super Bowl winning quarterback. He's one of their investors. So it's really interesting. Yeah, we're seeing a new crop of startups that are really making their mark, and it's great to see, Rob, us kind of Ottawa find its way out of that funding drought. We were in the desert, and we found the oasis, apparently.
Awesome. Thank you, David, for the update this week. Great stuff.
All right, thanks, Rob.
Talk to you soon. David Sally from the Ottawa Business Journal. Jeffrey Johnston from the Kingston Whig Standard right after the news on vaccine equity. This is City News.
number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
This is Monday, the 29th of November. Good morning. I'm Jason White. Right now in Ottawa, partly cloudy and -3. It's -4 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news this hour. 4 more possible cases of the new Omicron variant of COVID-19 in Ontario. 2 are in the Hamilton area, 2 in Ottawa. The first 2 Canadian cases were detected over the weekend in the capital, people who landed in Montreal after recently traveling to Nigeria. A 10-day OPP blitz around school zones busted a couple drivers who failed to stop for a school bus. One of those charged was driving a tractor trailer. The Upper Valley OPP conducting the patrols around Chalk River. Some VIA trains between Ottawa and Toronto have been cancelled for today and tomorrow. VIA says it's because of, quote, an operational issue impacting the infrastructure owner. A railway worker was struck and killed while working on a bridge just east of Toronto over the weekend. More trains are out on the Confederation line. Now 11 trains in service this morning. That increased the frequency of the trains to every 5 minutes. Rideau Transit Group's been gradually increasing service since the late summer derailment that shut down the line for 53 days. City News Time, 11:32. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Jeffrey Johnson joins us every Monday. He's an international affairs columnist with the Kingston Whig Standard. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Omicron is here. It's in Ottawa. It's probably in Hamilton. There is going to be a news conference at 1 o'clock this afternoon from the Health Minister for the Government of Quebec, and I suspect the message will be it's in Quebec, especially given that the Ottawa cases, those individuals actually landed at Trudeau Airport in Montreal. They were tested in Quebec. So I want to ask you, as you watch all of this unfold, Omicron, not just here, but all over the world. How surprised are you that this is happening? Because it seems to me that you've been warning about something exactly like this because of vaccine inequity.
Yes, it didn't have to be this way. Watching this unfold is like watching a slow-motion car crash. A year ago this month, I interviewed Peter Singer. He's a Canadian, and he's the special advisor to the head of the World Health Organization. And we talked about the coming vaccine rollout. And Peter Singer told me that the developed world needs to ensure that the developing world has access to vaccines. And he made the point that we have to vaccinate everyone to suppress the virus everywhere. And he explained to me about virus variants and how that they would arise if we did not vaccinate the rest of the world. And flash forward to November 2021, and we have not vaccinated many parts of the world, and now we're facing Omicron. And I'm fit to be tied because I've written so many articles and interviewed so many experts, and it was like screaming into a windstorm. Nobody was listening, and now we're in a really bad spot.
Okay. Are we guilty of being hoarders of vaccines, in your opinion?
In Canada?
In Canada, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Canada, like many other developed countries, made all these bilateral deals with the manufacturers of vaccine, and the developed world bought up 90% of the world's supply. And we probably should have been doing more earlier on. We're doing a lot better now, but I interviewed UNICEF back in June, and they had a proposal in June, and they wanted Canada to set aside 10% of all vaccines doses that came into Canada in June and donate them to COVAX. And then over the summer, increase the percentage of donations to COVAX. The World Health Organization's goal is to vaccinate 40% of the world's population at the end of this year and 60% of the world's population by mid-2022. We're not going to make that. We're not going to make that anywhere. We're not even going to be close to it. And Canada and the rest of the world could have done more. We should have done more. For example, Rob, we could easily The developed world could easily vaccinate every single healthcare worker in the developing world. We could do that in the next few weeks if we planned ahead, but we didn't, and we're now in a fix.
Yeah, I mean, for example, it's I suspect if not by the end of the day, but perhaps by the end of the week, we'll be expanding our booster shot campaign here in Ontario to get third shots into arms. And that's to protect, vulnerable people here in Ontario. And that's hard to argue with, but we're on third shots. When, for example, in Nigeria, it's 2.9% of that country's population is fully vaccinated. 2.9%.
Yeah, that's right. In a place like South Africa, it's 24% that fully vaccinated. Botswana, it's less than that. Zimbabwe, actually, it's like 18%. I don't want people to feel guilty about getting a booster shot in this country because Canada has a lot of doses that it's actually throwing away because our guidelines are so strict. And so CTV did a report last week, and they found that at least 1 million vaccine doses in Canada have been thrown away because they expired. So, there's no reason we couldn't be putting these booster shots into arms because these 100 million doses and the doses that are about to expire can't be sent to the developing world. Now, full disclosure, I myself am medically vulnerable, and I received my third dose last Thursday, and I'm grateful. And I think that if a third dose is offered to you, you should take it. And right now, there's a list out. The Ministry of Health has put a list of medications that make people eligible for the third dose. And I would urge people to look that up. You can go on my Twitter feed and find it, because if you take an immunosuppressant or drugs for chemotherapy and other drugs, you're available. But to move on, today there was a joint statement issued by COVAX and the African Vaccine Acquisition Trust and the African CDC, and they addressed the issue of vaccine inequality and inequity. And the big problem is the quality of doses being donated right now to Africa. So to date, about 90 million doses have been donated to Africa via COVAX and this African Vaccine Acquisition Trust and bilateral agreements. The problem is most donations have been ad hoc and provided with little notice and short shelf lives. So this means that vaccine doses are expiring before they can be used. The African countries in question don't have time to scale it up. They have to, when there's a sudden donation, they have to move all the resources from one project to another, and the cold chain, and it's not happening. It's not working well, and a lot of doses ultimately are going to waste through no fault of their own. So that's a serious problem. And so this coalition has put out an action plan. So they want donor countries to release large shipments, large volumes of doses in a very predictable manner so that these African countries can plan for it. They also want donor countries not to earmark donations for specific countries, because this violates equity and makes it more difficult for a reliable supply chain. Also, they want to make sure that we're not donating vaccines that are about to expire. So if you're going to donate a vaccine, it's got to have at least 10 weeks of shelf life after it arrives in the African country. Okay. And they also need to provide ancillaries, so things like syringes and diluent, and they also need developed countries to pay for the freight costs of donating these shipments of vaccines. So these are some really practical things that could be done to speed everything up, and they want all of these measures implemented by January 1st of 2022.
I suspect that there will be calls once more as well for a loosening of intellectual property rules and patent rules around the manufacture of vaccines. Not that I don't support that, and we don't need to get into that whole debate again. You and I are on opposite sides of that issue, but I think that's going to be another round of debate on that, I think, though.
Yeah, and more importantly, we need to set up manufacturing hubs in the global south. They can do this. Because if it's manufactured in various parts of the developing world, we can get the vaccines out faster. I just want to make a point, too. South Africa has done a really good job in detecting this Omicron variant, sequencing it, because they've got some great infectious disease experts there because they've been studying HIV and tuberculosis and these other diseases. And so they've got world-class scientists there. So I want people to understand that, we don't know for sure where Omicron came from. It may not have come from that part of the world. We just know that they were the first ones to detect it.
Yeah, it may not have come from that part of the world at all.
Yeah, so,
right.
So I don't want people, engaging in finger pointing. We're in this mess because, to be honest, some of us have been very selfish, and we've got to make sure that vaccines get out around the world, and everybody in this country who can get vaccinated should get vaccinated, and we also have to make sure that we vaccinate the developing world as soon as possible.
Yeah. It seems that South Africa, the scientists in South Africa should be getting credit. We shouldn't be blaming that country for anything.
The scientists there are first class, world class. I saw
they're the ones that alerted the world to this. Omicron.
Absolutely. Dr. Fauci was on the American news programs yesterday, and he was singing the praises of the South Africans, and they've had a very open and honest relationship with the South Africans, as opposed to what happened in China in 2020, where, the Chinese were holding back information and they weren't really talking to Fauci and the others, whereas the South Africans were really open with us. And so we owe them a debt because they've sequenced this thing. And, we're going to be pretty far ahead in the next week or two because of the scientific work the South Africans have done.
Okay. Good to hear from you this week. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Jeffrey Johnston, international affairs columnist with the Kingston Whig Standard. We're back with Money Mondays. Peter Fraser will join us from Manulife Securities, Cardinal Planning. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Papa Jack was started 14 years ago, really by accident more than anything. A friend of mine had bought a grocery store. A popcorn machine was in there. He didn't want it. I ended up by buying it. My family thought I was nuts. When I first said, come and pick up this popcorn machine, my son said, what the heck for? I won't use exact words. But anyway, we started, and it just kept on growing and growing. But at the time, I was the only one selling popcorn in Ottawa. But we persevered as a family, and here we are. So it's been very, very rewarding for my family and myself. And to see our brand name, Papa Jack, and Papa Jack came out of, I wanted something that was going to be very bilingual. So Papa, and then in Ontario, everybody called me Jack, even though my name is Jacques. In Quebec, it's fine, it's Jacques, but in Ontario, it was always Jack. So we married the two together, Papa, Jack. With the store that we have on Thurston Drive, it basically, the factory's in the back. If you come into the store, you can see how the popcorn is being made during the week. So it adds an extra layer of, you can see the sanitation, you can see how we do it. It's not like making popcorn. Most people thought when I started this, I was making popcorn in my garage or in my basement. No, never did. It was started in this building, in the back of the building, and then we kept growing and growing until what we have now. My daughter and my son came up with a brilliant idea to do a fundraiser online. So basically all people have to do is to register here, and we give them a special code number. And with that code number, they tell their friends or their neighbors, everybody, to buy online from us with that code number. And then at the end of each period, could be 2 weeks, could be a month, then we'll pay them a 20% of all the businesses that we got through that code number. One thing I'd like to say is thank you to all the Ottawa people who have supported us and support local businesses. sometimes people, they talk about buying locally. Now it becomes that much more important to buy locally, to support your local businesses, because not too many of them are going to survive this. We're fortunate that we're so far so good.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So let me give you a quick market snapshot because a big Friday sell-off. The Omicron sell-off was Friday. It was the worst day for the Dow Jones Industrial Average all year. And oil prices fell 13%. That's why you had the big drop in gas prices over the weekend. That may be a one-hit wonder, I'm afraid. Gas prices rebounding now, back above $70 a barrel, U.S., $70.59. That's an increase of about 3.5% today. Bitcoin is getting a bid. It's up almost 6% today. One Bitcoin, $57,470 U.S. dollars. It's up more than $3,000 right now. Gold, the old Bitcoin, 1787, the barbarous relic, 1787 U.S. an ounce. What else do we have? Our dollar is at 78.17 cents U.S. NASDAQ is up about 1.5%. The Dow is flat, but hanging above there, above 35,000. S&P 500 up about 1%, and the TSX is largely, let's call it unchanged when you're down, about 15 points on an index that's sitting at 21,000. So that's where we are. And stocks that were really getting hammered on Friday are starting to rebound. I notice even some of the airline stocks are catching a bid today. So with all of that being said, that's kind of your market snapshot. Now let's talk about planning your portfolio, planning for your portfolio, because it's Money Monday, and Peter Fraser's back, financial planner with Cardinal Planning and Manulife Securities Incorporated here in Ottawa. Every Monday we talk money and financial planning. Good morning.
Hi, Rob.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to hear from you. So, what's our theme for today?
Well, I was going to say, what a difference a day makes, 24 little hours.
Yes.
I thought we were talking about recession-proofing your portfolio, which we can get to, because I don't think that one excludes the other. But the backstory we were going to go to, and I think still stands, is that governments and centrals have spent and stimulated as a first response to COVID. And what some people call ZIRP worked, zero interest rate policies, but the medicine has driven some unintended consequences, some asset bubbles that show up in things like real estate, stimulus dependency, and the one that we're all struggling with is inflation. And there's been some dialogue around whether or not that's transitory, and I personally think it's not as likely to be transitory as we first thought. And so one of the things we were talking about getting ready for this segment was that historically rising inflation and the need to deleverage has always meant, or generally meant, that interest rates could be counted on to begin a march upwards. And I think that was going to be one of our questions.
Well, I mean, let's still, we'll still work from that assumption, because there's every indication that that's going to happen, that it's just a matter of when. I mean, the interest rates at the Bank of Canada are not going to stay at 0.25 forever.
Right.
They've already ended their so-called bond buying program. The Fed is still doing that, but the Bank of Canada has stopped that. So that's not going to last forever. So people
from zero.
Yeah. So people have to prepare for that eventuality, right?
Yeah.
So what are some tips about preparing for that?
Well, we hope that central bankers get that rate increase right, looking for that kind of Goldilocks solution, not too hot, not too cold. If they don't, obviously there's slowdown in the cards, if that helps, or if that doesn't go exactly right. And that was part of our discussion, is a recession. And, is that imminent? I'd still like to say that I don't think there's a high degree of evidence today that recession is imminent. We use 7 commonly held leading indicators, 6 of which are still signaling no. Inflation is the outlier there. It's signaling a resounding yes, but the 6 other leadings are simply saying for the moment that recession risks remain low. And then, of course, 7 little letters arrived on Friday, adding up to the new word of the day, Omicron. As you pointed out in the lead-up, markets plunged 2 to 3% in North America, and it's almost humbling because it proves again that the pandemic and its risks are still active. We're all investing in a situation that's fluid, somewhat uncertain, and that there are downside risks. So, Omicron, as an example, threatens to kind of restrain the recovery at some level. It was part of the fear, I think, that went into Friday's movement, supply chain issues. And one of the consequences, germane to what we're talking about here, is that central banks have already sort of gone from hawkish to doves in terms of these rate increases. So like you say, I don't think it's that they're not coming. I think we're kind of standing by again to see, when will they come and to what extent. And the discussion these days is, in the last few days, obviously, is that we've got, there may be more time before those begin to march upwards than we thought.
Right. But you mentioned these, the leading indicators for a recession are they're just not there right now. One of them is positive inflationary trends. That's there right now.
Right.
But all the others that you would use are not. For example, inverted yield curve, which is a classic sign, an indicator for a recession. Usually if the yield curve is inverted, meaning that the short-term interest rates are higher than the long-term interest rates, you have an inverted yield curve. Oh, recession. But that's not happening right now. So there you go. The Purchasing Managers Index, is it below 45? No, it's not even close to that, right?
Correct.
So that's good. Tighter financial conditions. What does that mean? Tighter financial conditions, generally speaking, what does that mean?
Money and money supply is plentiful. People can get their hands on oodles of money.
Yes.
So that's not a problem yet.
Yeah.
Housing starts are not in decline.
No. Labor market weakening. No, it's not weakening. We have 1 million job vacancies. That's the problem right now. Leading economic indicators, negative. No. So all of these are pretty, that's the bullish case right now, right? So
I think it's the case to say that the risk remains low in 2022. Doesn't mean there aren't a couple of ideas you couldn't consider in your portfolio, because that was one of the things we wanted to talk about. But do we want to go there for a few minutes?
Sure thing. Yeah.
Okay. So, I think dividend payers, whenever a rising interest rate environment comes around, they ought to be preferable to bonds in some measure. Canadian financials, Canadian banks, I think, are in a pretty great position for both, share appreciation generally and dividend increases. I think it never goes out of fashion to be on top of owning high-quality businesses, and I personally don't count out the USA. I think stocks there still have quite a long runway to grow. You mentioned it at the beginning, but energy, particularly here in Canada, I think remains a very strong consideration. Supplies are tight. I think that movement in the price of oil has been might have been temporarily halted, but I think it's still going to be reflected in tight supplies. And, it's probably worth mentioning that hard assets are worth a look. You called gold the old Bitcoin, but agriculture, land, things like that always perform well if recession is in the air. And as I say, I think it's early days to be able to say that that's definitively the case. But nevertheless, as Friday pointed out, having some antacid on hand for the roller coaster effect is always a good portfolio contributor too.
Yeah. The great Dennis Gartman of the Gartman Letter says he likes to invest in things that when he drops it on his foot, it hurts.
Correct, yeah.
So,
a hard asset.
A hard asset, yeah. But one of the things with this environment, with inflation being where it's at and with interest rates being where it's at, is what do you do with fixed income in that kind of environment, Peter?
Yeah, a very good question. I mean, rising interest rates kind of have a perverse effect. You'd think, oh, that'll be good for bonds, but rising interest rates generally reduce the value of a bond portfolio. Right. They have sort of a negative correlation to what you would normally think might happen. I think that one of the protective measures is to make sure that the duration of the bonds that you hold, if you have to hold them, you want them as short as possible. You want them 1, 2, 3 years. Interest rate increases are the hardest on bond durations that go out a long time. So that's something that can be structurally fixed. I think dividend payers make a reasonably, a very nice facsimile for being in bonds on that score, and probably provide more upside potential. But being fixed income is going to be going to require a lot more attention in a rising interest rate environment for sure.
Okay, great segment this week. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rob.
Yep, talk next Monday for our Money Monday with Peter Fraser, financial planner with Cardinal Planning and Manulife Securities here in Ottawa. That's it for the Rob Snow Show for today. We're back right after the 9 o'clock news tomorrow. Our noon newscast, complete update on everything that's been going on today. Lots of new information to tell you about coming up at noon. And then the Sam LaPrade Show, all ahead on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
Weekdays at 9 on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV.